ancient cave, thousands of years before pyramids, temples, or holy books existed. A small group of humans sits around a flickering fire. They have no written language, no kings, no cities, no idea that one day their descendants will build civilizations that stretch across continents. But tonight, something changes forever. They look into the flames, into the stars above them, and into the unknown. For the first time, they begin to wonder, is there something beyond what they can see? Is there a hidden force controlling the world around them? The storm, the animals, the seasons, life and death. And from this simple moment of curiosity, fear, and imagination, something is born that will shape humanity forever. Religion. But where did it truly begin? Was the first God born in the mind of a hunter staring at the night sky? Did the first prayers echo through an ancient cave long before humans knew how to write? Was it the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, the Neanderthals, or a civilization so ancient that its name has been completely forgotten? The truth is far stranger than most people imagine, because the first religion was not a temple. It was not a sacred book. It was not a powerful priest standing before a crowd. The earliest traces of religion were hidden deep in the behavior of our ancestors, inside their fears, their dreams, their rituals, and their desperate search for meaning in a dangerous world. Long before humanity created gods with names, humans already seemed to believe that something invisible surrounded them. Imagine the world of our ancient ancestors. There were no cities glowing at night, no roads, no medicine, no protection from the forces of nature. A single mistake could mean death. A failed hunt could mean starvation. A harsh winter could wipe out an entire group. Every day was a battle against an unpredictable universe. The sun disappeared every night. The moon changed its shape. Thunder exploded from the sky like the voice of an angry giant. Rivers could provide life one season and destroy everything the next. Animals were powerful, mysterious, and sometimes terrifying. To ancient humans, the world was alive. The mountains were not just mountains. The rivers were not just rivers. The animals were not just animals. Everything seemed to have a spirit. This idea, known as animism, may have been one of humanity's earliest forms of belief. The idea that nature itself contained unseen forces. A wolf was not only a predator, it could represent strength, danger, wisdom, or protection. A tree was not only wood, it could be a living connection between earth and sky. The line between the physical world and the spiritual world was beginning to disappear. And then, something even more mysterious happened. Humans began burying their dead. This might sound simple, but it changed everything. Many animals die and disappear, but humans started treating death differently. They placed bodies carefully into the earth. They sometimes added tools, food, decorations, and objects that seemed important. Why? Why would someone give a dead person items they could never use again? Why would a group spend valuable time and energy honoring someone who was no longer alive? One possibility is that early humans believed death was not the end. Maybe they imagined another world beyond this one, a place where the dead continued their journey. And if that was true, then humans had already crossed a major psychological boundary. They were no longer only surviving. They were imagining. The ability to imagine something unseen may be one of the most important moments in human history. A lion can understand danger. A bird can find shelter. A wolf can protect its pack. But humans could imagine invisible worlds. We could create stories about things that could not be touched. We could believe in forces beyond our immediate experience. We could look at the stars and ask questions. And those questions would eventually create gods. Deep inside prehistoric caves, another mystery appeared. Ancient humans began creating art. Not just simple marks, not just practical drawings. They painted animals with incredible detail. They carved strange figures. They created symbols that still confuse scientists today. Some of the oldest cave paintings show animals that were essential for survival: horses, bison, deer, and predators. But why paint them deep inside caves where almost nobody would see them? These were not ordinary places. They were dark, hidden, and difficult to reach. Some researchers believe these caves may have been sacred spaces, places where humans entered a different world, a place where they connected with spirits, a place where the boundary between reality and imagination became thinner. The cave itself may have been seen as something alive, a doorway into another realm. And then came one of the most fascinating discoveries in human history: the Lion Man. Deep inside a cave in Germany, archaeologists discovered a small statue carved from mammoth ivory. It was about 40,000 years old. It showed something impossible: a human body with the head of a lion, a creature that never existed in nature. But it existed in the human imagination. This was not simply a picture of an animal. It was something new, a being created from two different worlds: the physical world and the invisible world. Many researchers believe this may be one of the earliest signs that humans were thinking about supernatural beings. Not just animals, not just nature, something beyond. A god, a spirit, a protector, or perhaps something we cannot even name. And this raises one of the biggest questions in human history. Did religion begin because humans discovered something real? Or did religion begin because humans needed something to explain the unknown? When a hunter returned safely from a dangerous journey, did he thank a spirit? When rain arrived after a long drought, did people believe someone had answered their prayers? When someone died, did families believe their loved one had simply disappeared? Or did they imagine that another world waited beyond the darkness? These questions may have been asked thousands of years before the first civilization ever existed. The oldest religion in the world may not belong to Egypt. It may not belong to Mesopotamia. It may not belong to any empire we know, because the first religion may have existed inside the human mind itself. A spark of belief that appeared when our ancestors first looked at the universe and realized something terrifying. They were small. The world was enormous. And there were mysteries everywhere. The first gods may not have been carved into stone. They may have been born from fear, from wonder, from hope, from the human desire to believe that chaos had a hidden order. And once that idea entered the human imagination, it never left. Thousands of years later, humans would build giant temples reaching toward the heavens. They would create thousands of gods, write sacred texts, perform rituals, and tell stories that would survive for millennia. But the beginning was much simpler. A dark cave, a small fire, a group of humans staring into the unknown, and a question that would echo through history: what is out there? And perhaps even more importantly, who is listening? Before the first temples rose from the earth, before priests wore sacred robes, before kings claimed they ruled with the blessing of the gods, humans were already searching for something beyond themselves. But the mystery becomes even deeper when we travel further back into the forgotten world of prehistoric humanity. Because the earliest evidence of religion may not be found in written records or ancient cities. It may be hidden in the way our ancestors treated the dead. Thousands of years ago, in a world covered by ice, forests, and endless wilderness, early humans faced a question that no animal before them seemed capable of asking. What happens after we die? Death was everywhere. A failed hunt, a broken bone, a freezing night, a dangerous predator. Life could disappear in a moment. But instead of simply leaving their dead behind, humans began doing something extraordinary. They stopped. They gathered. They performed rituals. And this simple act may have been one of the first signs that humans were becoming something completely different from every other creature on Earth. Imagine a small group of prehistoric humans standing beside a grave. The person they loved is gone. Their body no longer moves. Their voice is silent. Yet the group does not treat them as an empty shell. They carefully place the body into the ground. Maybe they add tools. Maybe they add food. Maybe they decorate the body with red pigment known as ochre, a substance that appears again and again in ancient burials. Why? Why would people who had to fight every day for survival spend precious time on someone who could no longer help the group? The answer may reveal the birth of spirituality itself. They may have believed the person was still there in some form. Not visible, not physical, but present. A spirit, a soul, something that continued beyond death. This idea is so powerful that it appears in human societies again and again throughout history. Thousands of years later, Egyptians would build massive tombs for their dead. Mesopotamians would leave offerings for ancestors. Ancient Chinese civilizations would communicate with those who had passed away. The details changed, but the idea remained. The dead were not completely gone. They were somewhere else. And perhaps this belief began long before civilization itself. One of the most fascinating examples comes from ancient burial sites connected to Neanderthals. For a long time, many people imagined Neanderthals as primitive creatures, barely different from animals. But discoveries over the last century have challenged that idea. Neanderthals buried their dead. They cared for injured members of their groups. They may have used symbols. They may have even had their own forms of ritual. Deep inside caves, archaeologists discovered bodies placed in positions that looked deliberate, not random, not accidental, carefully arranged. Some burials included objects placed near the body. This suggests something important. Neanderthals may have understood death in a symbolic way. They may have wondered where a person goes when their body stops working. And if they did, then the roots of religion may reach back even further than modern humans. Perhaps the first spiritual questions were not asked by kings or philosophers. Perhaps they were asked by hunters sitting around a fire during the Ice Age. But death was not the only mystery that shaped early belief. The natural world itself was a source of endless questions. To ancient humans, nature was both beautiful and terrifying. The sun gave warmth but disappeared every night. The moon changed its shape. The stars moved across the sky in patterns that seemed impossible. The seasons came and went. Animals appeared and vanished. The world seemed to follow rules that nobody understood. And humans wanted answers. One of the oldest ideas that may have emerged was that everything had a hidden force behind it. The river had a spirit. The mountain had a spirit. The animal had a spirit. The storm had a spirit. This way of thinking created a world filled with invisible personalities. Nature was no longer just nature. It was a living network of forces. A hunter who killed a powerful animal might have believed he needed to respect its spirit. A group preparing for a journey might have performed rituals asking for protection. A community facing a harsh winter might have tried to communicate with the unseen powers controlling their survival. Religion was not separate from life. It was life. Every sunrise, every hunt, every birth, every death could have a spiritual meaning. And then came another major turning point. The human imagination became even more powerful. People started creating stories, not just stories about what happened, stories about why things happened. Why does the sun rise? Why does lightning strike? Why do animals behave the way they do? Why do humans dream? Dreams may have played a huge role in early religion. Imagine waking up after seeing someone who died years ago. In the dream, they were alive. They spoke. They walked. They were real. To a prehistoric person, This could have been overwhelming. Maybe dreams were not just dreams. Maybe they were journeys. Maybe the dead were visiting from another world. This could have strengthened the belief that there was something beyond the physical body. The dream world may have become one of the first places humans imagined the supernatural. And from this came another important figure: the shaman. The person believed to communicate with the spirit world. Although the exact origins of shamanism are impossible to prove, many ancient cultures developed similar traditions. A special person who entered altered states. A person who interpreted dreams. A person who claimed to understand invisible forces. The shaman may have been one of the earliest religious specialists. Not a priest in a temple, not a ruler, but someone in a small tribe who stood between the human world and the unknown. Through chanting, dancing, fasting, or rituals, they attempted to reach another reality. Whether these experiences were spiritual, psychological, or both, they became a powerful part of human culture. And this may explain something incredible. Why did humans all over the world begin developing religion? Different continents, different languages, different environments. Yet similar ideas appeared again and again. Spirits, ancestors, sacred animals, invisible forces, life after death. It is almost as if something inside the human mind naturally searches for meaning. Maybe religion was not invented by one civilization. Maybe it slowly emerged wherever humans began asking the same questions. Who are we? Why are we here? What happens when we disappear? And what is the force behind this strange universe we live in? The oldest religion may not have had a name. It may not have had temples. It may not have had holy books, but it had something much more powerful. A human mind looking into the darkness and refusing to believe that the darkness was empty. Because once humans imagined a world beyond the visible one. The gods were already beginning to take shape. Before the first written prayers, before the first temples touched the sky, and before humanity created thousands of named gods, there was a mysterious connection between humans and the animals that surrounded them. The earliest religions may not have started by looking upward toward the heavens. They may have started by looking into the eyes of the creatures standing beside us. For ancient humans, animals were not simply sources of food. They were powerful beings. They were hunters, rivals, teachers, and sometimes even protectors. A wolf could represent intelligence and teamwork. A bear could represent strength and danger. A bird flying above the earth could appear to possess a connection to the sky itself. And in the minds of prehistoric humans, animals may have existed somewhere between the physical and spiritual worlds. This idea would shape human belief for thousands of years. Long before the Egyptians worshipped cats, long before civilizations created animal-headed gods, and long before temples were filled with statues of sacred creatures, early humans were already forming relationships with the animal kingdom. But why? Why did animals become such a central part of the first religions? The answer may lie in survival. Imagine living 40,000 years ago. You wake up in a world where every animal matters. A deer could mean food for your family. A predator could mean death. A migration pattern could determine whether your group survives another winter. Animals controlled your fate. They were mysterious, powerful, and often more capable than humans. They could see in the darkness. They could run faster. They could sense danger before you. To early humans, animals possessed abilities that seemed almost supernatural. And perhaps they were. Not because they were magical, but because humans began to see them as symbols of forces greater than themselves. This is where one of the oldest religious ideas may have been born. The belief that humans and animals were connected. Not separate. Connected. A person could carry the spirit of an animal. An animal could guide humans. An animal could hold wisdom that humans needed. This idea appears in cultures across the world. the hunter who respected the animal he killed, the tribe that believed their ancestors came from animals, the warrior who wore animal skins to gain strength, the storyteller who passed down legends about humans transforming into creatures. These beliefs may seem strange today, but thousands of years ago they represented humanity's attempt to understand the world. And then something even more mysterious appeared. Cave art. Deep inside hidden chambers, far away from sunlight, ancient humans painted animals that were larger than life. They painted horses, bison, rhinoceroses, lions, animals that looked almost alive as the flames of a torch moved across the walls. But the biggest question remains: why paint them there? Why travel deep into dangerous caves where almost nobody would see the artwork? Some researchers believe these caves were not galleries. They were sacred spaces, places where humans believed they could communicate with another world, a world of spirits, a world beyond ordinary reality. The cave itself may have represented a journey. Entering the cave was like entering the unknown. The darkness could symbolize death. The inner chambers could represent another realm, and the paintings could have been a way of connecting with the forces that controlled life. Some of the most fascinating discoveries come from caves in Europe. One of them is the famous Chauvet Cave in France. Inside are paintings created more than 30,000 years ago. The artwork is breathtaking. The animals are drawn with movement and emotion. They almost seem alive. But among these animals, something unusual appears. Creatures that do not exist. Hybrid beings. A mixture of human and animal. This was not simple observation. This was imagination. And imagination may have been the doorway to religion. Because to create a being that does not exist in nature, humans had to think beyond the physical world. They had to imagine something unseen, something impossible, something supernatural. One of the most famous examples is the Lion Man statue. Carved from mammoth ivory around 40,000 years ago, this small figure shows a human body with the head of a lion. A creature that belongs to no known species. A creature born entirely from the human mind. Imagine the person who created it. They spent hundreds of hours carving a tiny figure with primitive tools. They did not make it randomly. They gave it meaning. The Lion Man may have represented a spirit, a guardian, a powerful ancestor, or perhaps a being from a world beyond humans. Whatever it meant, it reveals something extraordinary. Early humans were not only surviving, they were creating worlds. They were asking questions. They were imagining invisible realities. And that ability would completely transform our species. Because once humans believed there were forces beyond the physical world, they began looking for ways to communicate with those forces. And this is where ritual begins. Ritual is one of the most mysterious behaviors in human history. A ritual is not simply an action. It is an action filled with meaning. A repeated behavior that connects the physical world with the symbolic world. A hunter painting his body before a hunt. A group gathering around a fire. A person placing an object beside a dead relative. These actions may not have practical value, but they have emotional and spiritual value. They tell humans that they are part of something bigger, and fire itself may have played a massive role. For early humans, fire was almost magical. It gave warmth. It pushed away predators. It transformed raw food into something new. But it also moved. It danced. It changed shape. It disappeared and returned. Fire looked alive. Perhaps that is why so many ancient religions connected fire with the divine. The flames became a symbol of transformation, a bridge between worlds, a place where humans gathered and shared stories, and those stories became myths. The first gods may have begun as stories told around ancient fires. A story about the sun, a story about a powerful animal, a story about a spirit that controlled the storm. Generation after generation, these stories grew. The spirits became characters. The characters became gods. The gods became rulers of the universe. And thousands of years later, humans would build entire civilizations around them. But the origin was much simpler. A group of people sitting together in the darkness, trying to understand a world that was beautiful, dangerous, and mysterious. They looked at the animals around them. They looked at the sky above them. They looked into the fire in front of them. And they asked the question that would shape all of human history. Is there something more? Something hidden? Something watching? Something beyond what our eyes can see? And perhaps that question was the first prayer ever spoken. For thousands of years, humans have searched for the first moment when religion was born. But perhaps the answer was never buried inside a forgotten temple or written on an ancient tablet. Perhaps the first religion began somewhere much darker, inside the human mind. Because before humans created gods, they created something even more powerful. They created meaning. The ability to look at a random event and believe there was a hidden reason behind it may have been one of the greatest turning points in human evolution. A storm did not simply happen. A disease was not just bad luck. A successful hunt was not only skill. Something caused it. Something unseen. Something powerful. And from this idea, the first invisible forces began to emerge. Imagine a prehistoric hunter walking through a forest thousands of years ago. The wind suddenly changes. The trees begin moving. The sky becomes dark. A powerful storm arrives. The hunter has seen storms before, but this time feels different. The thunder sounds like a voice. The lightning looks like a weapon thrown from the sky. The storm seems angry. To the modern mind, we understand the science behind it. But to ancient humans, nature was a mystery. And when humans face mysteries, they search for patterns. They search for intention. They search for someone or something behind the event. This may be one of the deepest roots of religion. The belief that the universe is not random. That behind every event there is a force, a will, a presence. This idea would eventually lead to the creation of gods. But before gods had names, humans may have believed in something much simpler. Spirits. The world was filled with them. The spirit of the river, the spirit of the mountain, the spirit of the animal, the spirit of the ancestors. Every part of existence could contain a hidden energy. This belief system is often called animism, and many scholars believe it may represent one of humanity's earliest forms of religion. But animism was not just a belief. It was a way of seeing reality. Ancient humans did not separate nature from spirituality. The two were connected. A forest was not just a collection of trees. It was a living place. A mountain was not just rock. It was ancient and powerful. A river was not just water. It carried life, and perhaps even personality. This way of thinking created a world that was alive with invisible relationships. Humans were not rulers of nature. They were participants in it. Every action mattered. Every animal mattered. Every decision had consequences. And this belief may explain one of the strangest discoveries in prehistoric archaeology: the careful treatment of animal remains. In many ancient sites, researchers have found animal bones arranged in unusual ways, not simply discarded, placed, organized, sometimes decorated. This raises an important question. Were these only practical actions, or were they rituals? Did ancient humans believe the spirit of the animal needed respect? Did they believe the animal would return? Did they fear angering the invisible forces around them? We may never know for certain, but the pattern appears again and again. Humans did not just consume the world, They interacted with it. They built relationships with things they could not see. And then another mystery appears: the human fascination with the sky. The sky was perhaps the greatest mystery of all. Every day the sun crossed above the earth. Every night the stars appeared. The moon changed shape. The planets moved slowly through the darkness. To ancient humans, the heavens looked like a completely different realm, a place beyond reach, a world above the world. And naturally, humans wondered, who lives there? What controls the movement of the sun? Why does the moon disappear and return? Why do stars follow patterns? The sky became a place of power, and later civilizations would transform these ideas into some of their greatest gods. The sun gods of Egypt, the storm gods of Mesopotamia, the sky gods of ancient Greece. But the roots were much older. The first humans who stared upward were already asking the same questions. The heavens were mysterious, and mystery creates imagination. Another major step in the development of religion came through dreams. Dreams are one of the strangest experiences humans have. Every night, the mind creates worlds. We see places that do not exist. We speak with people who are far away. Sometimes we even see people who have died. For ancient humans, dreams may have been impossible to explain. A dead relative appears. They speak. They give warnings. They offer advice. Were they really gone? Or were they visiting from somewhere else? This idea may have strengthened belief in an afterlife. The dream world could have been seen as a doorway, a place where humans could communicate with spirits. And those who seemed especially connected to this world became important members of their communities. The first spiritual leaders may have been born from this. People who claimed they could enter the spirit world. People who interpreted dreams. People who performed rituals. People who became bridges between humans and the unseen. The earliest versions of priests and shamans may have existed long before temples. Not in grand buildings, but beside small fires, inside caves, among small groups fighting to survive. Their power came from knowledge, from stories, from their ability to explain the unknown. Because humans do not only need food and shelter, humans need answers. We need to understand why things happen. We need to believe our lives have meaning. And religion may have been humanity's first attempt to answer the biggest questions. Why are we alive? Why do we suffer? Why do we die? What happens after? These questions existed long before writing, long before civilization, long before anyone carved the first god into stone. And perhaps that is why religion appeared in so many different places, because humans everywhere shared the same fears, the same hopes, the same curiosity. A person living thousands of years ago in Africa, a person living in Europe during the Ice Age, a person living in ancient Asia. They all looked at the same mysterious universe. They all saw the same darkness. They all searched for the same hidden answers. The first religion was not created by one person. It was not invented by one civilization. It was a slow awakening, a moment when humans realized they could imagine something greater than themselves. Something invisible, something powerful, something beyond the physical world. And once that idea was born, humanity would never be the same again. For thousands of years, humans have built temples that reached the heavens, carved gods into stone, and created stories that shaped entire civilizations. But before any of that existed, there was another sacred place. A place far older than pyramids, far older than written words. A place hidden beneath the earth. The cave. Deep inside the darkness, early humans may have created the first spiritual spaces in history. Not because caves were comfortable homes, but because they felt different. They were mysterious. They were separated from the ordinary world above. When an ancient person entered a cave, they were not just walking into a hole in the ground. They were entering another world, a world of shadows, echoes, and unknown dangers. And perhaps this is where the first true religious experiences began. Imagine walking through a narrow passage with only a small flame lighting your way. The air is cold. The walls surround you. Every sound comes back as an echo. Your footsteps sound like someone following behind you. Your own voice seems like another voice answering. To an ancient human, this must have felt supernatural. The cave itself seemed alive. The darkness had a presence. The echoes had a voice. The walls held images of powerful animals. This was not an ordinary place. This was a place where humans could feel connected to something beyond themselves. One of the most fascinating discoveries in the search for the origins of religion comes from caves across Europe and the Middle East. Deep inside these ancient chambers, archaeologists have found paintings and carvings created tens of thousands of years ago. Some of the oldest artworks ever discovered. But these were not random drawings. They were carefully placed, hidden deep underground, far away from daily life. And that raises a powerful question. Why would ancient humans create art in places where almost nobody would see it? If these paintings were only decoration, why hide them? Why travel through dangerous tunnels to reach them? Why spend hours, days, or even weeks creating them? The answer may be connected to belief. Some researchers believe these caves were among the first sacred spaces, places where humans performed rituals, places where they communicated with spirits, places where they believed the boundary between the human world and the invisible world became weaker. And the most mysterious part? Many of these paintings focused on animals. Animals that dominated the lives of prehistoric humans. Massive bison, powerful lions, fast horses, dangerous predators, creatures that could provide food or bring death. But the way humans painted them suggests something deeper. They were not just recording what they saw, they were giving these animals importance, meaning, power. Some animals were drawn with unusual features. Some were combined with human characteristics. Some seemed almost mythical. This was the birth of something completely new. The creation of beings that existed only in imagination. The first monsters. The first spirits. The first gods. One of the greatest examples of this ancient imagination is the famous Lion Man. Created around 40,000 years ago, this small sculpture was carved from mammoth ivory. At first glance, it looks impossible. It has the body of a human, but the head of a lion, a creature that never walked the earth, at least not in this form, but it existed inside the mind of its creator. And that may be the most important part. The Lion Man proves that ancient humans could imagine things beyond reality. They could create invisible worlds. They could think about beings that were not physically present. And this ability may be the foundation of religion itself. Because religion requires imagination. The ability to believe in something you cannot touch. Something you cannot see. Something that exists beyond ordinary experience. But what did the Lion Man represent? No one knows. Maybe it was a god. Maybe it was a guardian spirit. Maybe it represented a powerful animal ancestor. Or maybe it was a symbol of transformation. The idea that humans could connect with the power of animals. Many ancient cultures believed that humans and animals were connected. A hunter could gain the strength of a lion, the wisdom of a wolf, the speed of a bird. By wearing animal skins, masks, or performing rituals, humans may have believed they could cross the boundary between species. And this idea appears in religions thousands of years later. The gods of Egypt often had animal forms. The ancient Greeks told stories of humans and animals becoming connected. Many indigenous traditions around the world describe humans and animals as relatives. Perhaps these ideas began in the darkness of prehistoric caves. But caves were not only places of art, they were also places of sound. And sound may have played a much bigger role than we realize. Some ancient caves have unusual acoustic properties. A single voice can echo through the chambers. A chant can become louder. A simple sound can feel like it comes from everywhere. Imagine a group of humans gathered deep underground. The fire is burning. The walls are covered with strange animals. A spiritual leader begins chanting. The sound grows. The cave seems to answer. For people who believed the world was filled with invisible forces, this experience could have been overwhelming. It may have felt like communication with another realm. The cave was no longer just a cave. It became a bridge, a doorway, a place where humans could reach towards something greater. And this brings us to another mystery: the first religious leaders. Who were the people guiding these experiences? Who decided which rituals to perform? Who understood the meaning of the symbols? Perhaps there were early versions of shamans, individuals who were believed to have special connections with the spirit world. They may have used music, dancing, storytelling, and altered states of consciousness to enter what they believed was another reality. Whether these experiences were spiritual, psychological, or both, they were powerful. They brought communities together. They created shared beliefs. They gave people a sense of connection. And that may be one of the greatest reasons religion survived. It did something humans desperately needed. It turned fear into meaning. It transformed the unknown into a story. It gave humans a way to understand a world that was often terrifying. The first religions were not about rules. They were about questions. They were about mystery. They were about humanity looking into the darkness and believing there was something on the other side. And perhaps the oldest sacred place on earth was not a temple. It was not a pyramid. It was not a city. It was a quiet cave, where the first humans entered the shadows, looked at the impossible images on the walls, and wondered if something was watching back. The first gods may have been born in the darkness of caves, but eventually humans carried those invisible forces into the world above. The spirits of animals became protectors. The forces of nature became powerful beings. The dead became ancestors. And slowly the unseen world began to take shape. But then something changed forever. Humans stopped wandering. They began to settle. They began building villages. They began growing food. And with the birth of civilization came a completely new chapter in the history of religion. Because when humans created cities, they did not just build homes. They built homes for the gods. Thousands of years after the first humans stared into the darkness and imagined invisible forces, one of the oldest known civilizations rose between two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, Mesopotamia, the land that would become the birthplace of cities, writing, kings, and some of the first organized religions in human history. This was a world where gods were not distant ideas. They were everywhere. They controlled the weather. They controlled the harvest. They controlled the fate of entire kingdoms. To the people of Mesopotamia, the universe was a massive system that needed balance. And humans had a role to play. They were not the owners of the world. They were caretakers, servants of the divine order. The earliest Mesopotamian beliefs grew from the same ancient ideas that appeared thousands of years earlier. Nature had power. The unseen world mattered. Something beyond humans controlled the forces around them. But now those forces had names. They had personalities. They had stories. The spirits of the ancient world were becoming gods. One of the oldest known creation stories from Mesopotamia is called the Enuma Elish. It begins not with humans, not with land, not with light, It begins with water, a vast, endless ocean of chaos. Two great forces existed at the beginning: Apsu, the god of fresh water, and Tiamat, the goddess of salt water. Together, they represented the original forces of creation. From them came younger gods. But as the younger gods grew stronger, they became loud and disruptive. The older generation wanted silence. The younger generation wanted existence. And conflict began. Eventually, the god Ea defeated Apsu and took his place. But Tiamat, filled with anger and grief, created a powerful army of monsters to destroy the younger gods. The universe itself was at war. And then a new champion appeared, Marduk, the storm god, the warrior of the younger gods. In the great battle, Marduk defeated Tiamat. He split her body apart and used it to create the heavens and the earth, the sky above, the land below, order from chaos. And then, according to the myth, humans were created. But unlike many later religious traditions, humans were not created simply to live in paradise. They were created to serve, to maintain the world, to work for the gods. This belief shaped almost every part of Mesopotamian life. Farming was religious. Building was religious. Kingship was religious. Even daily routines were connected to the divine. A successful harvest meant the gods were pleased. A flood meant something had gone wrong. A disease could be a sign of divine anger. The world was constantly communicating. Humans just had to understand the message. And this created one of the most important roles in ancient society: the priest. The priest was not simply a religious teacher. The priest was a connection between humanity and the gods, because the gods were believed to live in temples. Massive structures called ziggurats rose above Mesopotamian cities. These stepped temple towers looked like mountains built by humans. And that was the point. They were bridges between earth and heaven, a way for humans to reach upward. At the top of these structures were sacred spaces where priests performed rituals. The gods were treated almost like royal guests. Their statues were dressed, cleaned, given food and drink. They were honored every day, because if the gods were unhappy, the entire city could suffer. Imagine living in a world where every event had a spiritual meaning. A storm was not just weather. A drought was not just climate. A strange dream was not just a dream. Everything could be a message. And humans became obsessed with understanding those messages. They studied the stars. They examined animal behavior. They interpreted dreams. They searched for signs. This desire to understand the hidden world led to some of the earliest forms of astrology and divination. People believed the universe had patterns, and if they could read those patterns, they could predict the future. But perhaps the most interesting part of Mesopotamian religion was the enormous number of gods. Thousands existed. Every city had its own special deity. There was Anu, the god of the sky; Enlil, the powerful god of wind and storms; Enki, the god of wisdom and creation; Inanna, goddess of love and war; and Marduk, who eventually became the chief god of Babylon. These gods were not perfect. They argued. They fought. They made mistakes. They had emotions. In many ways, they reflected humanity itself. The ancient gods were not completely separate from humans. They were larger versions of human fears, desires, and struggles. But what happened after death? What did Mesopotamians believe waited beyond life? Their answer was surprisingly dark. The underworld was not a paradise. It was not a place of reward or punishment. It was a shadowy existence where all souls eventually went, rich or poor, king or farmer. Everyone faced the same fate. This fear of death made ancestor rituals extremely important. The dead could not simply be forgotten. Families offered food and drinks to their ancestors. They believed the spirits of the dead remained connected to the living. If ignored, those spirits could return, not as peaceful memories, but as restless ghosts. The living and the dead existed together, two worlds connected by ritual, and this idea would appear in many civilizations that came after: Egypt, China, Greece, Rome. Different gods, different stories, but the same ancient human need. The need to believe that life has meaning, that death is not the end, that the universe is not random. Mesopotamia did not create the first human belief in the supernatural. That began thousands of years earlier. But Mesopotamia transformed those ancient instincts into something new. Organized religion, temples, priests, written myths, a complete system explaining humanity's place in the universe. The first gods were whispers in the darkness, but now they had names. They had homes. They had kingdoms. And humanity had entered a new age, the age of the gods. Before Egypt built its giant pyramids, before Greece created stories of mighty Olympian gods, and before Rome spread its empire across continents, another ancient civilization was already searching for answers about life, death, and the mysteries of existence. Along the banks of the Nile River, a civilization would rise that transformed religion into one of the most powerful forces the ancient world had ever seen: ancient Egypt. For thousands of years, the Egyptians looked at the world around them and saw something sacred: the river that gave them life, the sun that crossed the sky every day, the animals that shared their land, the mysterious journey from life to death. Everything had meaning. Everything had a place. Everything was connected to a greater cosmic order. And at the center of Egyptian religion was one powerful idea: balance. The Egyptians called this balance Ma'at, not just a goddess, not just a concept, a force that kept the entire universe together. According to Egyptian belief, before creation there was only chaos, a dark, endless ocean, a world without structure, and from this chaos came order. The gods brought shape to the universe. The sun rose. The land appeared. Life began. But chaos was never completely destroyed. It was always waiting. The job of humanity was to protect the balance, to keep Ma'at alive. This belief shaped everything the Egyptians did. A good life was not only about personal success, it was about maintaining harmony with the universe. Kings ruled because they were believed to protect this balance. Priests performed rituals because they helped preserve it. Ordinary people followed traditions because every action mattered. The world was a delicate system, and if humans failed, chaos could return. This fear of chaos appears in many ancient religions. The idea that the universe was created from disorder, that humans had a responsibility to keep it stable. A similar idea existed in Mesopotamia, and this connection raises a fascinating question. Did ancient civilizations develop these beliefs independently? Or were they remembering something much older, something from a time before written history, a forgotten spiritual tradition that disappeared thousands of years ago? No one knows. But the similarities are impossible to ignore. The Egyptians created one of the most complex religious systems ever known. Their gods were everywhere. Some looked human, some looked like animals, some were a combination of both. And these animal forms were not random. They represented the powers humans saw in nature. The falcon could represent the sky. The lion could represent strength. The crocodile could represent danger and power. The cat could represent protection and mystery. The Egyptians believed animals were not ordinary creatures. They were connected to divine forces. This is why animals became such an important part of Egyptian religion. The same connection between humans and animals that may have begun in prehistoric caves continued thousands of years later. But now, those ideas had become a complete mythology. One of the most famous Egyptian gods was Ra, the sun god. Every morning, Ra traveled across the sky. Every evening, he entered the underworld. Each night, he battled the forces of darkness. And every morning, he returned. The daily journey of the sun became a symbol of life, death, and rebirth. Because the Egyptians noticed something profound. Everything seemed to follow a cycle. The sun disappeared and returned. The river flooded and receded. Plants died and grew again. The seasons changed. Nature itself was constantly being reborn. And humans wanted to believe they were part of that cycle. This idea became central to Egyptian beliefs about death. Unlike many ancient cultures, Egyptians did not see death as the end. They saw it as a transition, a journey. The dead person continued into another existence. But reaching that existence required preparation. This is why Egyptians built some of the most famous tombs in human history. The pyramids. These massive structures were not just monuments. They were spiritual machines, designed to help the dead ruler travel into the next world. The body was preserved through mummification because the Egyptians believed the physical form remained important. The soul needed a connection to the body. The tomb was filled with objects, food, jewelry, tools, weapons, everything the person might need. Because the afterlife was not a simple disappearance. It was another world. And the most important moment came after death. The judgment. According to Egyptian belief, the dead entered a great hall where their heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at. The heart represented the person's true nature, their actions, their choices, their morality. If the heart was heavy with wrongdoing, it would fail the test. The soul would be destroyed by a terrifying creature. A being that combined parts of different animals, part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus, a creature that existed only to consume the unworthy. But if the heart was balanced, the person could enter the paradise known as the Field of Reeds, a perfect version of life, a place of peace, a place where people could be reunited with loved ones. The Egyptian idea of paradise was not completely different from Earth. It was a better version of the world they already knew. A world with endless food, peace, family, and happiness. This tells us something important about ancient religion. People often created afterlives based on what they valued most. For Egyptians, the perfect existence was a peaceful continuation of life. But Egyptian religion was not only about death. It controlled daily existence. People prayed. They performed rituals. They gave offerings. They celebrated festivals. The gods were not distant. They were part of everyday reality. A person could wake up in the morning, thank the sun, honor the gods, work, eat, and sleep. All of it was connected. Religion was not a separate activity. It was the foundation of society. And perhaps one of the most fascinating things about Egyptian religion is how long it survived. Thousands of years, dynasty after dynasty, king after king. The names changed, the temples changed, but the core ideas remained. Order, balance, life after death, the connection between humans and the divine. The Egyptians took ancient human questions and turned them into one of the greatest religious systems the world has ever seen. But their story also reveals something deeper. The first humans who looked at animals and stars were searching for the same answers. The Egyptians were simply continuing a journey that began in the darkness of prehistoric caves. A journey that started with one question: what exists beyond what we can see? And thousands of years later, humans were still asking the same thing. Because the oldest mystery in history is not only where the gods came from, it is why humans needed them in the first place. For thousands of years, the ancient world was filled with gods. Gods of the sky, gods of the oceans, gods of war, gods of death, gods of harvest. Every civilization seemed to create its own explanation for the mysteries of existence. But one ancient culture followed a different path. Instead of focusing only on powerful gods controlling the universe, they looked deeper. They looked inward. They searched for the connection between the individual, the universe, and the endless cycle of existence. This was the beginning of one of the oldest living religious traditions on Earth, the ancient roots of Hinduism. Unlike many religions, Hinduism does not have a single founder. There is no one person who started it, no single moment when it suddenly appeared. Instead, it developed slowly over thousands of years, like a river collecting water from countless streams. Ancient traditions, philosophical ideas, ritual practices, stories passed from generation to generation, all combined into something that would become one of humanity's most enduring belief systems. To understand where Hinduism began, we must travel back thousands of years to the Indian subcontinent, a world of ancient cities, mysterious cultures, and spiritual questions. Long before modern India existed, early civilizations were already creating symbols and rituals. Among the oldest known civilizations in this region was the Indus Valley Civilization, a sophisticated society that flourished thousands of years ago. They built planned cities, created advanced systems, developed trade networks. But their beliefs remain one of history's greatest mysteries. They left behind symbols and objects. But because their writing system has not been fully understood, we still do not know exactly what they believed. Some artifacts suggest connections with later Hindu traditions, images of animals, meditative figures, possible sacred symbols. But the true meaning remains hidden, and that mystery makes the origins of Hinduism even more fascinating. Because religion often does not begin with a clear starting point. It evolves, it changes, it absorbs ideas. And somewhere in this ancient world, a new spiritual tradition was forming, the Vedic tradition. Around thousands of years ago, sacred hymns began to be composed in an ancient language known as Sanskrit. These texts became the foundation of early Hindu religious thought. They were called the Vedas, and they were not just books. They were collections of sacred knowledge. For generations, they were memorized and passed down orally, before they were ever written. This is one of the most remarkable achievements in human history. People preserved thousands of lines of poetry and ritual instructions purely through memory. The Vedas described a universe filled with powerful forces, not unlike Mesopotamia or Egypt. The world was alive with divine beings. The sun, the fire, the wind, the storms. Each force had a personality. Each had a role. One of the most important gods was Agni, the god of fire. Fire was sacred because it connected humans with the divine. When people performed rituals, they offered gifts into the flames. The fire carried those offerings upward. It became a bridge between earth and the gods. This idea is incredibly ancient. The same fire that surrounded prehistoric humans in caves later became a sacred connection to the divine. Thousands of years separated them. But the symbolism remained. Fire was transformation. Fire was communication. Fire was life. Another important figure was Indra, a powerful warrior god associated with storms and victory. Indra represented strength. He battled enemies of order. He defeated forces of chaos. Again, the same theme appears. Order against chaos. A universe that must be protected. a world that needs balance. But as Hindu thought developed, something changed. The focus slowly moved away from only worshiping external gods. People began asking deeper questions. What is reality? What is the self? What is the universe made of? What is the true nature of existence? These questions became central in a group of texts known as the Upanishads. And this was a major turning point. The Upanishads explored ideas far beyond simple rituals. They introduced concepts that would shape Hindu philosophy for thousands of years. One of the most important ideas was the relationship between Atman and Brahman. Atman represented the inner self, the deepest essence of a person. Brahman represented the ultimate reality, the force behind everything, the universe itself. The idea was revolutionary. What if the individual and the universe were connected? What if the same force that created the cosmos also existed within every person? This changed the way humans thought about spirituality. The gods were no longer only outside. The divine could also be found within. Another major idea was reincarnation, the belief that life continues through many births. A person does not simply live once and disappear. They return, again and again. This cycle became known as samsara, and the goal was not endless rebirth. The goal was liberation, a state known as moksha, freedom from the cycle, a final understanding of reality. This was a completely different vision of existence. Instead of focusing only on pleasing gods or gaining rewards after death, humans were searching for wisdom, understanding, a deeper connection with the universe. But Hinduism continued to evolve. Over time, new traditions developed. New gods became central. Among the most important were Shiva and Vishnu. Shiva became associated with destruction and transformation, not destruction as pure evil, but destruction as part of the natural cycle. Old things must end, so new things can begin. Vishnu became associated with preservation, maintaining balance in the universe. And the goddess traditions became equally important. The divine feminine appeared in many forms: powerful, creative, protective. This shows another unique feature of Hinduism. The divine was not limited to one form. The universe could be understood through many different expressions, many paths, many traditions, many ways of searching for truth. But perhaps one of the most complex and controversial parts of ancient Hindu society was the caste system. Over time, society became organized into different social groups. These divisions became deeply connected with religious ideas. The system created a hierarchy that shaped people's lives for centuries. While interpretations and practices changed across time and regions, the caste system became one of the most debated aspects of Hindu history. It shows how religion and society often become connected. Beliefs influence cultures, and cultures influence beliefs. But despite all changes, one thing remained: the search for meaning. Hinduism continued because it addressed questions humans have asked since the beginning. What is the universe? What is consciousness? What happens after death? Are we separate from the world? Or are we part of something greater? The ancient humans who stared into the fire thousands of years ago were asking similar questions. The Hindus of ancient India simply developed new ways to explore them. And that is what makes the history of religion so fascinating. Different civilizations, different gods, different stories, but the same human curiosity. The desire to understand the invisible force behind existence. The search for something beyond ourselves. The same search that began in darkness, around a small prehistoric fire, under the endless sky. Long before the rise of famous empires, before written history recorded the names of kings and gods, Humans were already searching for a connection with the unseen world. They looked at the mountains and wondered if something lived above them. They looked at the rivers and wondered if something controlled their power. They looked at the stars and wondered if they were watching over them. And in one of the most mysterious corners of the ancient world, a civilization developed a spiritual tradition unlike anything else. A religion built around nature, ancestors, spirits, and the invisible energy believed to flow through all things. This was ancient Chinese religion, a world where gods were important, but ancestors were just as powerful. A world where the past was never truly gone, because the dead were still part of the family, still part of society, still part of the decisions of the living. The earliest recorded Chinese civilization was the Shang dynasty, a powerful kingdom that existed more than 3,000 years ago. And while many ancient cultures left behind temples and statues of their gods, the Shang left behind something different. Oracle bones, small pieces of animal bone and turtle shell covered with ancient writing. These objects may look simple, but they reveal one of the oldest recorded forms of communication between humans and the spiritual world. The people of the Shang dynasty believed the universe was filled with forces that influenced everything: weather, war, harvests, health, the future itself. And when they needed answers, they did not simply guess. They asked. They asked the spirits. They asked the ancestors. They asked the divine. The process was fascinating. A question was carved onto an oracle bone. Then heat was applied until cracks appeared. Those cracks were interpreted as messages. Imagine standing thousands of years ago, holding a piece of bone with a question written on it. A question about whether your army would win, whether your crops would grow, whether a child would survive, and believing the answer was hidden inside the patterns of the cracks. To modernize, it may seem mysterious, but to ancient people, this was a direct conversation with forces beyond human understanding. And perhaps the most important part of Shang religion was ancestor worship. Unlike some cultures that focused mainly on gods in the sky, the Chinese believed their ancestors remained active after death. The dead were not simply gone. They became part of the spiritual world. A grandfather who had passed away could still influence the family. A former king could still guide the kingdom. The connection between generations never ended. This idea became one of the strongest foundations of Chinese culture. Respect for ancestors. Honor for the past. The belief that those who came before you still mattered. In Shang society, the king had a special role. He was not only a political ruler, he was a religious figure, a bridge between humans and the spiritual realm. The king communicated with the highest forces of existence. One of the most important beings was Shangdi, the supreme power, the highest divine authority. Not exactly like the gods of Greece or Mesopotamia, Shangdi was less like a human-like ruler sitting on a throne, and more like a powerful force controlling the order of the universe. The king claimed his authority came from Shangdi. His rule was connected to the divine, but this idea would transform over time. As Chinese civilization developed, a new concept emerged: the mandate of heaven. The idea that rulers governed because heaven allowed them to. But if a ruler became cruel, corrupt, or failed to maintain harmony, heaven could remove that support. A dynasty could fall. A new ruler could rise. This created one of the most influential political and religious ideas in Chinese history: the connection between morality and power. A king was not only judged by humans, he was judged by the universe itself. This belief shaped China for thousands of years. The ancient Chinese did not see nature as something separate from humanity. The universe was a living system. Everything was connected: the sky, the earth, the seasons, human actions. all parts of one great balance. This idea would later develop into concepts like harmony and the relationship between opposing forces. The belief that reality was not random, that everything existed within a greater pattern. But Shang religion was not only about kings and ancestors. Ordinary people also practiced rituals. They honored family members who had died. They made offerings. They performed ceremonies. They believed respect for ancestors protected the family. A person's identity was not only their own. They were part of a chain stretching backward and forward through time. The living carried the legacy of the dead, and they had a responsibility to future generations. This idea is still visible in many Chinese traditions today. The importance of family, the respect for elders, the memory of ancestors. Ancient beliefs often survive in ways people do not expect. A religion can change, a civilization can transform, but certain ideas remain. And ancient China was not only a land of ancestor spirits, it was also a place where stories of powerful gods developed. Later Chinese traditions introduced many divine beings, gods of nature, immortals, spiritual beings, heroes who became legendary. The line between history and mythology became blurred. A great warrior could become a symbol of protection. A wise leader could become almost divine. A natural force could become a spiritual personality. This shows another pattern that appears throughout human history. Humans often transform what they admire into something sacred. The powerful become gods. The mysterious becomes spiritual. The unknown becomes mythology. But perhaps the most fascinating part of ancient Chinese religion is the idea that humans were not fighting against the universe. They were trying to live in harmony with it. Unlike some traditions that saw humans as separate from nature, Chinese thought often emphasized connection. A person's actions affected the world around them. A ruler's behavior affected the kingdom. A family's actions affected future generations. Everything was connected. A single mistake could disturb the balance. A single act of wisdom could restore it. And this brings us back to the oldest question. Where did religion begin? Was it in caves? Around fires? In the first cities? With the first gods? Or was it something that appeared naturally when humans realized they were part of something much larger? Ancient China gives us an important clue. Religion may not have started with gods. Maybe it started with relationships. The relationship between humans and nature. The relationship between the living and the dead. The relationship between one generation and the next. Before humans built temples to the heavens, they remembered the people who came before them. Before they worshipped distant gods, they honored their own ancestors. Because perhaps the first sacred thing humans ever discovered was not in the sky. It was the connection between each other. Before the rise of Greece, before the power of Rome, before the great temples of the ancient world became monuments of stone and gold, there was a mysterious civilization hidden on an island in the middle of the Mediterranean. A civilization that worshipped powerful female figures. A civilization that built enormous palaces. A civilization that performed rituals involving one of the most respected and feared animals in the ancient world, the bull. This was the world of the Minoans, and their religion remains one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient past. Because unlike the Egyptians or Mesopotamians, the Minoans left behind no clear religious books, no sacred scriptures, no complete list of gods, no explanation of their rituals. Instead, they left behind something much stranger. Images, symbols, paintings, statues, and questions. Thousands of years later, historians and archaeologists are still trying to understand what these ancient people truly believed. The Minoan civilization flourished on the island of Crete around 4,000 years ago. They built impressive cities. They created massive palace complexes. They developed art, trade, and architecture that influenced the civilizations that came after them. The most famous of these sites was the Palace of Knossos, a huge complex filled with colorful paintings and mysterious rooms. Later, Greek legends would connect this place with the story of the Minotaur, a creature that was half human and half bull, a monster trapped inside a giant labyrinth. For centuries, people believed this was only a myth, a fantasy. But then archaeologists uncovered the remains of the Minoan world, and suddenly the old stories seemed to contain echoes of something real. Not the Minotaur itself, but the importance of bulls. Because the bull was everywhere in Minoan culture, painted on walls, carved into objects, used in rituals. The bull was not simply an animal, it was a symbol of power, strength, fertility, and perhaps something divine. One of the most famous Minoan images shows a ritual known as bull leaping. In this scene, a person appears to grab the horns of a charging bull and jump over its back. It looks dangerous, almost impossible. A mixture of athletic performance and religious ceremony. But what did it mean? Was it a test of courage? A ritual connected to fertility? A symbolic battle between humans and nature? Or a way to honor a powerful spiritual force? The truth is, nobody knows for certain. And that mystery makes it even more fascinating. Because religion in the ancient world was often not about explaining everything. It was about experiencing something. The feeling of standing before something powerful, something larger than yourself. The Minoans seem to have understood this deeply. Their sacred places were often dramatic. Mountain peaks, dark caves, hidden chambers, places where the natural world itself became part of the religious experience. They did not separate nature from spirituality. A mountain was not just a mountain. A cave was not just a cave. These places could be entrances to another reality, a connection between humans and the divine. This idea appears in many ancient religions. Humans have always been fascinated by places that feel different, places that seem powerful. A dark cave, a towering mountain, a flowing river, a giant tree. Long before temples existed, nature itself was the first temple, and the Minoans continued this ancient tradition. One of the biggest mysteries of Minoan religion is the role of women. Many of the religious figures discovered by archaeologists appear to be female. The most famous is a figure often called the Great Goddess, a powerful female deity connected with nature and animals. She appears holding snakes, standing on mountains, surrounded by symbols of life and power. Some researchers believe this suggests that women held a very important religious role in Minoan society. Female priestesses may have conducted ceremonies. Women may have represented divine authority. The Minoan world may have been different from many later societies dominated by male gods and rulers. But without written records, we can only study the evidence they left behind. And the evidence creates more questions, not fewer. The Minoans also had sacred caves, deep underground spaces that may have been used for rituals. To ancient humans, caves had always carried a powerful meaning. They were places of darkness, but also places of birth. A cave could feel like the womb of the earth, a place where transformation happened. A person could enter one world and symbolically return changed. This connection between caves and spiritual experiences goes back thousands of years. The same darkness where prehistoric humans may have created some of the first rituals continued to attract later civilizations. The Minoans were also connected to the sea. Living on an island, they depended on the ocean. The sea provided food, trade, travel, but it also represented danger, storms, unknown depths. For ancient people, the ocean was mysterious, and mystery often becomes sacred. The Minoans likely had spiritual beliefs connected to the sea and the forces that controlled it. Because when humans cannot control something, they often try to understand it through stories and rituals. The gods become explanations for the unpredictable. The storm becomes the anger of a deity. The harvest becomes a blessing. The flood becomes a warning. The ancient world was filled with these connections. But perhaps the greatest mystery of Minoan religion is why it disappeared. Around the 2nd millennium BC, the Minoan civilization began to decline. A massive volcanic eruption occurred on the nearby island of Thera, one of the most powerful eruptions in ancient history. The explosion caused earthquakes. Ash covered the region. The effects may have damaged Minoan society. Later, the Mycenaean Greeks gained influence over Crete. Eventually, the Minoan world faded. Their palaces fell silent. Their rituals ended. Their gods disappeared. But their influence survived. Many ideas from Minoan culture may have shaped later Greek mythology. The stories of Zeus, the labyrinth, the Minotaur. The powerful gods of later Greece may contain memories of a much older world, a world where mountains, animals, and nature itself were sacred. And this brings us to one of the most fascinating patterns in the history of religion. Religions do not simply appear and vanish. They transform. Old beliefs become new stories. Ancient gods become legends. Forgotten rituals become myths. The Minoans remind us that human spirituality existed in many forms. Not every religion needed a holy book. Not every god needed a written name. Sometimes a civilization leaves behind only images, and those images are enough to show one important truth. Thousands of years ago, humans were already searching for meaning. They were already looking at the world and asking the same questions we ask today. Why are we here? What controls the forces around us? What happens after death? Is there something beyond what we can see? The Minoans answered those questions through bulls, mountains, caves, and mysterious gods. Their world disappeared, but the questions remained. And those questions continued to shape the next great religions of human history. For thousands of years, humans looked at the world around them and searched for signs of something greater. They watched the stars move across the sky. They watched animals migrate. They watched the seasons change. They watched life appear and disappear. And slowly, they began to believe that behind all of these mysteries was something unseen. A force, a spirit, a power. But religion was not only created in temples and palaces. Sometimes it appeared in the darkest places on earth. Inside caves, far away from cities, far away from kings. Long before organized civilizations existed, humans were already creating symbols that may have represented their earliest ideas about the supernatural. And one discovery in particular changed everything we thought we knew about the beginning of religion. Deep inside a cave in Germany, hidden for tens of thousands of years, archaeologists discovered a strange object. A figure unlike anything humans had ever seen before. A creature with the body of a human and the head of a lion. The Lion Man, a small sculpture carved from mammoth ivory. Only about 30 centimeters tall, but its meaning may be enormous. Because this strange figure may be one of the oldest known examples of human imagination creating something beyond the natural world. A being that did not exist. A creature from another reality. A possible god. The Lion Man was discovered in the Hohenstein-Stadel cave in Germany. The cave itself dates back to the Ice Age, a time when humans lived in a world of extreme cold, dangerous animals, and constant survival. This was not a world of cities. There were no pyramids, no temples, no written prayers, only small groups of humans trying to survive. But inside that harsh world, someone sat down and spent hundreds of hours carving a mysterious figure, using simple stone tools. slowly shaping mammoth ivory, creating something that existed only in the mind. And that may be the most important part. The Lion Man was not simply an object. It was an idea. The person who created it imagined something that could not be seen. A human mixed with an animal. A being between worlds. A creature that belonged neither completely to nature nor completely to humanity. This ability to imagine invisible realities may have been one of the greatest turning points in human history. Because once humans could imagine things that did not physically exist, a whole new world opened. Spirits, gods, myths, stories, religions, all became possible. But why create a figure like this? What was the purpose of the Lion Man? Was it a god? A spirit? A protector? A symbol used by a shaman? Or maybe something completely different? The truth is, we cannot know for certain. And that uncertainty is what makes it fascinating. Archaeologists study clues. The way the object was made, where it was found, other objects nearby. And the evidence suggests it was not an ordinary decoration. The cave contained other unusual items. Animal teeth with holes, bones, tools, objects that may have been connected to rituals. This suggests the cave was not just a place to live. It may have been a sacred space, a place where humans entered another state of mind, a place where stories were told, where traditions were created, where the invisible world became real, and perhaps the Lion Man was part of that world. Imagine the scene. Thousands of years ago. A group of Ice Age humans sitting around a fire. The darkness of the cave surrounding them. The flames moving across the walls. And someone holding this strange figure. A story begins. Maybe the Lion Man was not just an object. Maybe it was a character. A powerful being from a world beyond humans. A protector. A creator. A warning. A symbol of the mysteries around them. The oldest religions may not have started with written beliefs. They may have started with stories. Humans are storytellers. We explain the unknown through imagination. When we see something powerful, we create meaning. When we face danger, we search for protection. When we experience death, we wonder if something continues. The Lion Man may represent that moment when humans first crossed a psychological boundary. The moment when we stopped only reacting to the world and started creating new worlds inside our minds. But the Lion Man is not the only evidence of ancient spiritual thinking. Across the world, researchers have discovered other signs of early symbolic behavior. Cave paintings, burial rituals, carved objects. These discoveries suggest that prehistoric humans were not only surviving, they were thinking, they were questioning, they were searching for meaning. One of the strongest clues is the way ancient humans treated their dead. Many prehistoric groups buried their loved ones carefully, sometimes with objects, sometimes with decorations, sometimes in special positions. This suggests they may have believed death was not simply the end. The body stopped moving, but maybe something remained. A spirit, a presence, a connection. This belief appears again and again throughout human history. From prehistoric caves to the greatest civilizations, different cultures created different explanations. But the question was always the same. What happens after we die? The Lion Man may represent one of humanity's first attempts to answer another question. What exists beyond the visible world? A human with the mind of an animal with the spirit of a human, a being between worlds. Perhaps that was the perfect symbol for early religion, because religion itself exists between worlds, between the known and the unknown, between reality and imagination, between human life and something greater. But the story becomes even more mysterious. Because the Lion Man was not the oldest evidence of symbolic belief forever. New discoveries continued to push the timeline further back. In Indonesia, scientists discovered cave paintings showing figures that appear to combine humans and animals. Images created more than 50,000 years ago, even older than the Lion Man. These discoveries suggest that the ability to imagine supernatural beings may have appeared earlier than we ever expected. Maybe religion did not begin in one place. Maybe it appeared in many places. When humans reached the same level of imagination, when their minds became capable of asking the same impossible questions. Who are we? Why do we exist? What is beyond the world we see? And once those questions entered the human mind, they never left. Every civilization that followed continued searching for answers. The Egyptians built temples. The Mesopotamians wrote myths. The Chinese honored ancestors. The Indians explored the universe within. The Greeks created gods with human emotions. Different answers. Same mystery. The Lion Man reminds us that before humans had organized religions, they had something even more fundamental. A sense of wonder. A feeling that reality was bigger than what their eyes could see. And perhaps that was the true beginning. Not the first temple. Not the first priest. Not the first written prayer. But the first moment a human looked into the darkness and imagined something looking back. For most of human history, religion was not written in books. It was not carved into giant temples. It was not controlled by kings or priests. It existed in whispers, in stories told around fires, in symbols carved into stone, in the way humans buried their dead, in the way they looked at the sky and wondered if something was watching. But as civilizations grew, these invisible beliefs began to take physical form. Humans started building monuments, places designed not just for living, but for connecting with the unseen. And one of the greatest examples of this transformation stands in Egypt, a place where stone, astronomy, ritual, and religion merged into one of the most mysterious, sacred landscapes ever created. Karnak, a temple complex unlike anything the ancient world had seen. Located near the ancient city of Thebes, Karnak was not built in a single year, not even in a single lifetime. It was expanded for more than 1,000 years by generations of Egyptian rulers. Each king added something. A new hall, a new monument, a new offering to the gods. The result was not just a temple, it was a physical representation of Egyptian religion itself, a world made of stone. The ancient Egyptians believed the universe had order. They believed creation was a victory over chaos. And Karnak was built as a place where that cosmic order could be maintained. The temple was mainly dedicated to Amun-Ra, one of the most powerful gods in Egyptian history. Amun began as a local god of Thebes, but over time, his importance grew. Eventually, he merged with Ra, the sun god, together becoming Amun-Ra. The hidden power and the visible power of the universe combined. Amun represented what could not be seen. Ra represented the sun that everyone could see. Together, they represented the mystery behind existence itself. And every day, Egyptian priests performed rituals to honor this divine force. The temple was not just a place where people prayed. It was believed to be the home of the gods. The statues inside were not simple representations. The Egyptians believed they contained the presence of the divine. The priests had a responsibility. They cleaned the statues, dressed them, presented offerings, performed ceremonies. Because if the gods were neglected, the balance of the universe could be threatened. To modern people, this may seem strange, but to ancient Egyptians, it was a practical responsibility. Just as humans needed food and care, the gods also required attention. The connection between humans and gods was not distant. It was a relationship. a partnership. And Karnak was the center of that relationship. One of the most breathtaking parts of Karnak is the Great Hypostyle Hall, a massive room filled with enormous stone columns. Some columns rise more than 20 meters high. Standing beneath them must have been overwhelming. Imagine entering this space thousands of years ago. The walls covered with images, the columns towering above you like a stone forest, sunlight entering through openings above, shadows moving across the carvings. The entire structure was designed to create a feeling of entering another world, a place where humans were small and the gods were enormous. This was not accidental. Ancient religious architecture often used size to create awe. The same pattern appears everywhere. Huge temples, massive statues, mountain-like structures. Humans built upward because the heavens represented something beyond them. The architecture itself became an argument, a message. There is something greater than us. Karnak also reveals how closely religion and politics were connected. The pharaoh was not just a ruler. The pharaoh was seen as a divine figure, a connection between the human world and the gods. A successful king proved the gods were satisfied. A weak king risked chaos. This was not just a belief. It was the foundation of Egyptian civilization. Religion gave meaning to power. Power protected religion. They existed together. But Karnak also reveals something deeper, a question that appears throughout the history of religion. Why do humans create sacred places? Why build something that takes generations to complete? Why spend enormous effort on something invisible? The answer may be connected to one of the strongest human instincts, the desire to create permanence. Humans know life is temporary. We are born, we grow, we disappear, but stone lasts. A temple can survive thousands of years. A monument can outlive civilizations. Perhaps humans built sacred structures because they wanted to leave behind evidence that they existed, that they believed, that they searched for meaning. Karnak was not only a place for gods. It was a message from one generation to the next. A message saying, "We were here. We looked at the universe. We tried to understand it. And we believed there was something beyond ourselves." But Egypt was not the only civilization that built sacred places. Across the ancient world, humans were doing something similar. In Mesopotamia, they built ziggurats. In India, they built temples dedicated to cosmic forces. In China, they created spaces to honor heaven and ancestors. In Europe, mysterious stone circles appeared. Different cultures, different gods, but the same human action, building a bridge between Earth and the unknown. This raises one of the biggest questions in the search for the oldest religion. Was religion created because humans feared nature? Because they needed explanations? Because they wanted comfort? Or because they experienced something that felt truly spiritual? Scientists have different ideas. Some believe religion developed from survival instincts. Humans are pattern seekers. We look for causes. We look for connections. A storm happens. Something must have caused it. A person dies. Something must continue. Others believe religion grew from human social needs. Shared beliefs unite groups. Rituals create identity. Stories connect generations. And some believe spirituality is a fundamental part of human consciousness itself. A natural result of having a mind capable of imagining invisible realities. The truth may include all of these, because religion is not a simple invention. It is a reflection of what humans are: curious, creative, afraid, hopeful, searching. Karnak stands as one of the greatest examples of this search. A monument built by people who looked at the universe and saw more than matter. They saw meaning. They saw order. They saw a connection between human life and something greater. And perhaps that is why ancient temples still fascinate us today. Because even after thousands of years, the question remains the same. What is beyond what we can see? The Egyptians answered with gods of the sun, death, and creation. Other civilizations answered differently, but every answer came from the same place: the human desire to understand the unknown. The same desire that began when the first humans gathered around a fire, looked into the darkness, and wondered if they were truly alone. Long before the first temples reached the sky, before kings claimed they ruled by the will of gods, and before humans gave names to the forces of nature, there was something much older. A question, a mystery, a fear. What happens when we die? For early humans, death was the greatest unknown. A person could be alive one moment and completely still the next. The body remained, but something was missing. The voice, the movement, the personality. The invisible part of a person seemed to disappear. And this mystery may have been one of the most powerful forces that shaped the birth of religion. Because across the ancient world, humans began treating the dead in ways that suggest they believed death was not the end. They buried their loved ones. They protected their bodies. They placed objects beside them. They performed rituals. They created ceremonies. Thousands of years before the pyramids, before written prayers, before named gods, humans were already thinking about another world. The world of the dead. One of the oldest clues comes from prehistoric burial sites. Deep in the earth, archaeologists discovered graves that were not simple places where bodies were abandoned. They were carefully arranged. The dead were positioned intentionally, sometimes covered with red pigment, sometimes surrounded by tools, sometimes buried with animals. These details reveal something extraordinary. The people who created these graves were not only dealing with death, they were expressing belief. But what exactly did they believe? Did they think the dead continued living somewhere else? Did they believe spirits remained nearby? Did they think objects could help the dead? We may never know. The ancient people left no written explanation, only their actions. And sometimes, actions reveal more than words. One of the most famous examples comes from the Neanderthals. For a long time, many people imagined Neanderthals as primitive creatures with little intelligence. But discoveries completely changed that view. They were skilled. They created tools. They adapted to difficult environments. And they may have practiced rituals. In places like Shanidar Cave in modern-day Iraq, researchers discovered Neanderthal remains that appeared to have been carefully buried. One burial in particular attracted attention. A Neanderthal skeleton was found surrounded by traces of ancient plants. Some researchers suggested flowers may have been placed with the body. If true, this would be one of the earliest signs of symbolic behavior connected to death. Imagine that moment. Tens of thousands of years ago. A small group stands inside a cave. Someone they knew is gone. They gather plants. They place the body carefully. They say goodbye. Why? Because they feel something. Grief, love, connection, perhaps even hope. This may be one of the first religious moments in human history. Not because someone created a god, not because someone built a temple, but because humans realized another person could disappear forever, and they refused to accept that the connection was completely gone. Death forced humans to ask questions. Questions that had no easy answers. Where does the person go? Why does life end? Is there something beyond the body? These questions appear in almost every religion that came later. The Egyptians created elaborate journeys through the afterlife. The Mesopotamians imagined a shadowy underworld. The The Greeks told stories about souls crossing into another realm. Different cultures, different answers, same mystery. The dead became one of the first bridges between humans and the supernatural. Ancient people often believed their ancestors still existed in some form. The dead were not gone. They became part of another world, a world that could influence the living. This idea became central in many early religions. The ancestors could protect the family, guide decisions, bring luck, or become dangerous if forgotten. This is why ancestor worship appears in so many cultures, from ancient China to indigenous traditions around the world. The relationship between the living and the dead became sacred. But burial practices also reveal something else: the beginning of symbolic thinking. A person does not need to bury a body. Nature does not require ceremony. Animals die and disappear. But humans created meaning around death. They transformed a biological event into a spiritual experience. This ability to create symbols may be one of the defining features of humanity. A stone is not just a stone. It can represent protection. A cave is not just a cave. It can become sacred. A dead person is not just a body. They can become a memory, a spirit, a presence. Religion grew from this symbolic world. And one of the most fascinating parts is how similar these ideas became across distant civilizations. Thousands of years apart, separated by oceans and mountains, humans repeatedly developed similar beliefs. The dead continue. Nature has spirits. The universe has order. Something exists beyond ordinary life. Why? One possibility is that humans share similar psychological instincts. Our brains are designed to search for patterns. We look for causes. We connect events. When something happens unexpectedly, we ask why. This ability helped humans survive. But it also shaped spirituality. A sudden storm, a successful hunt, a mysterious dream, a death. Everything could feel like part of a larger system. Another possibility is that religion developed because humans needed connection. Early humans lived in groups. Cooperation was survival. Shared rituals strengthened communities. A group that mourned together became stronger. A group that believed in the same stories became united. Religion was not only about gods. It was about people, their fears, their hopes, their relationships. But perhaps the most powerful part of ancient burial traditions is the emotional side. The first religious experiences may have come from one of the most human feelings of all: love. A person loses someone important. They cannot accept that the relationship has simply vanished. So they create a way for that person to continue. In memory, in spirit, in another world. Maybe the first gods were not born in the sky. Maybe they were born from the human heart, from the desire to keep connections alive, from the inability to believe that someone you loved could simply become nothing. The ancient graves remind us that before humans worshipped powerful beings, they honored the people who came before them. Before there were temples, there were burials. Before there were scriptures, there were rituals. Before there were gods, there was the mystery of death. And perhaps the oldest religious question was never, who created the universe? Maybe it was something much closer. Where did they go? And are they still with us? For thousands of years, humans have looked toward the sky searching for answers. The stars above were always there, silent, distant, unreachable, but they moved. They followed patterns. They appeared and disappeared with the seasons. And to ancient people, this was not just a beautiful sight. It was a mystery, a message, a connection to something beyond the human world. Before humans created written religions, before they built temples, they were already watching the heavens. The sky may have been one of humanity's first sacred spaces, because the sky controlled everything. The sun brought warmth. The moon controlled the darkness. The stars guided travelers. The seasons determined survival. For ancient humans, understanding the heavens was not just curiosity. It was a matter of life and death. And slowly, the movements of the sky became connected to religion. The first gods may not have lived in temples. They may have lived above, in the endless space beyond human reach. Across ancient civilizations, the sky became associated with power, the place where creation happened, the home of the highest beings, the domain of forces greater than humanity. The connection between heaven and religion appears almost everywhere. The Mesopotamians had Anu, the sky god. The Egyptians worshipped Ra, the sun god who crossed the heavens every day. The ancient Chinese believed heaven represented a powerful force that influenced rulers and society. The Greeks imagined gods living on Mount Olympus, closer to the sky. Different stories, different names, but the same human fascination. The heavens seemed alive, and perhaps the greatest mystery was the sun. Every morning it appeared, every evening it disappeared. Ancient people watched this cycle for thousands of years. The sun looked like a living force. It gave light. It gave heat. It allowed plants to grow. Without it, life would vanish. So it is not surprising that so many ancient religions created powerful sun deities. The Egyptians saw Ra traveling across the sky. Each night, he entered the underworld and battled darkness. Each morning, he returned. This daily journey became a symbol of life itself. Death, rebirth, renewal. The sun became more than an object. It became a story, a symbol, a divine power. But the moon was equally fascinating. Unlike the sun, the moon changed shape. It disappeared, returned, grew, shrank. Ancient people noticed these patterns and connected them with cycles. Birth, growth, death, recreation. The moon became associated with time, fertility, and transformation. Many early calendars were based on the moon. Humans were not just watching the sky. They were organizing their entire existence around it. The stars also played a major role. Before maps and modern navigation, stars guided travelers across deserts and oceans. A person who understood the stars had knowledge that could mean survival. This made astronomy deeply connected to spirituality. The people who studied the heavens were often priests. They were not only religious leaders, they were scientists of the ancient world. They observed, recorded, calculated. They searched for patterns, because they believed the universe was not random. Everything had meaning. This belief that the cosmos had order became one of the strongest foundations of ancient religion. The world was not chaos. It was a system, and humans had to understand their place inside it. This idea appears in many ancient cultures. The Egyptians called it Ma'at, the idea of balance and order. The Chinese developed ideas of harmony between heaven and earth. The Mesopotamians believed the gods maintained cosmic stability. The universe was like a giant structure, and humans were part of it. But there was another important connection between the sky and religion: the idea of communication. Ancient people believed the heavens could send messages. A strange event in the sky could be a warning, a comet, an eclipse, an unusual movement of planets. These events were often interpreted as signs, not random events, messages from powerful forces. Imagine seeing a total solar eclipse thousands of years ago. The sun suddenly disappears. The world becomes dark. Animals become confused. People panic. Without modern science, this would seem supernatural, a sign from beyond. a moment when the universe itself appeared to speak. These experiences shaped human imagination, and they became part of religious stories. The sky was not just above humans, it was connected to them. But perhaps one of the most fascinating examples of ancient sky worship comes from mysterious monuments built thousands of years ago. Stone circles, sacred structures, buildings aligned with the sun and stars. One famous example is Stonehenge, a massive stone monument built in prehistoric Britain. Its purpose remains debated. Was it a calendar? A burial site? A ritual center? A place for ceremonies? The truth is still uncertain. But one thing is clear. The builders understood the movement of the sun. They carefully positioned stones to align with important solar events. This shows that prehistoric humans were already studying the heavens, long before written records, long before advanced technology. They were observing the universe and connecting it to meaning. The sky became a giant storybook. The stars became characters. The sun became a hero. The darkness became a threat. And humans created myths to explain what they saw. This is how many religions developed. Reality and imagination blended together. The natural world provided the mystery. Human creativity provided the story. Together they created mythology. But why were humans so drawn to the heavens? One reason may be simple. The sky was beyond control. Humans could hunt, build shelters, make tools, but they could not command storms. They could not stop the sun from setting. They could not control the stars. The heavens represented something larger than humanity, something powerful, something unreachable. And throughout history, humans have always been fascinated by things greater than themselves. The ocean, the mountains, the sky, death, the unknown. These became the foundations of religion. The ancient humans who looked upward were not only searching for gods, they were searching for meaning. They wanted to know their place in the universe. Were they alone? Was there a purpose? Was someone watching? Thousands of years later, humans still ask the same questions. The technology changed. The civilizations changed. The names of gods changed. But the mystery remained. Because the sky still creates the same feeling it created for our ancestors. A feeling of wonder. A feeling of smallness. A feeling that the universe is far bigger than we can understand. And perhaps that feeling was one of the first sparks of religion. A human standing under the endless night sky, looking upward, and wondering what exists beyond the stars. The first gods may have been born in the darkness, not inside giant temples, not carved into golden statues, not written in sacred books, but in the deepest parts of the human imagination. A place where reality and mystery became impossible to separate. Thousands of years ago, before kings ruled civilizations, before humans recorded their history, our ancestors entered caves. They painted on walls. They carved symbols into stone. They created images of animals, strange beings, and mysterious figures. And hidden inside these ancient caves may be some of the earliest evidence of human spirituality. Because these were not ordinary drawings. Some were placed deep underground, far away from daily life, in locations that were difficult to reach, places where darkness surrounded everything. Why would ancient humans go so far into the earth to create these images? Why choose these locations? Why spend hours, days, or even weeks creating symbols where almost nobody would see them? The answer may reveal something incredible about the birth of religion itself. One of the most famous examples comes from prehistoric cave art found across Europe. In places like Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain, ancient humans created breathtaking paintings. Animals appear on the walls: horses, bison, deer, rhinoceroses, predators. The details are astonishing. The artists understood movement. They understood anatomy. They captured animals with incredible skill. But the biggest mystery is not how they painted. It is why. Some researchers believe these caves were not simply galleries. They were sacred spaces, places where humans attempted to communicate with another world, a world of spirits. Many ancient hunter-gatherer societies believed animals were more than sources of food. They were powerful beings. They had energy. They had personalities. They influenced survival. A successful hunt could mean life. A failed hunt could mean starvation. So animals became central to human imagination. The animals on cave walls may have been more than pictures. They may have represented spiritual forces. Some researchers suggest ancient humans may have believed the painted animals had a connection to the real animals outside. By creating the image, they were interacting with the animal's spirit, perhaps asking for success, protection, or balance. This idea appears in many traditional cultures around the world. The belief that nature is alive, that rivers have spirits, mountains have personalities, animals have souls. This is often called animism, and it may represent one of the oldest forms of religion. Before humans created complex gods, they may have seen the world itself as sacred. The forest was not just trees. The river was not just water. The animal was not just prey. Everything was connected. But there is something even stranger inside prehistoric caves. Among the animals are mysterious human-like figures, creatures that do not completely belong to the human world. Part human, part animal. These beings are called therianthropes, and they may be among the earliest imagined supernatural beings ever created. One of the most famous examples is the Lion Man, a small sculpture carved from mammoth ivory around 40,000 years ago. It shows a figure with the body of a human and the head of a lion. But what was it? A god? A spirit? A mythological creature? A story? We cannot know. But the existence of such a figure proves something important. Humans were imagining things that did not exist in the natural world. They were creating invisible realities. This ability may be one of the foundations of religion, because religion requires imagination, the ability to believe in something that cannot be physically seen, a spirit, a god, an afterlife, a force beyond nature. And prehistoric humans already had this ability. The caves reveal another mystery: sound. Many ancient cave paintings are found in places where the acoustics are unusual. Some chambers amplify voices. A person speaking inside can sound completely different. Deep, powerful, almost unnatural. Could ancient humans have used these spaces for rituals? Imagine entering a dark cave, a fire flickering, paintings surrounding you, a voice echoing from the stone. A story being told about spirits and ancestors. For early humans, this would have been an intense experience, a moment where the ordinary world disappeared, and something mysterious seemed to appear. This may have been one of the earliest forms of religious ceremony. Not a temple, not a church, a cave. The oldest sacred spaces were not built by architects. They were discovered in nature. A hidden chamber, a special mountain, a powerful river, places where humans felt connected to something greater. This pattern appears again and again throughout history. Humans search for locations that feel different, places that create emotion, places that inspire wonder. The cave was humanity's first cathedral, a place between worlds. Above ground was normal life. Inside the cave was mystery, darkness, transformation, the unknown. And perhaps that is why caves appear so often in mythology. Many cultures describe heroes, gods, and spirits emerging from underground places. The earth itself becomes a source of creation, a womb, a beginning. This idea may come from our earliest experiences. Entering a cave meant leaving the familiar world, going into darkness, then returning. A symbolic journey, a transformation. But cave art also raises a deeper question. Were prehistoric humans already thinking about gods? Or were they simply expressing themselves? Maybe the answer is not one or the other. Religion may not have appeared suddenly. It may have developed slowly. First came curiosity, then symbolism, then rituals, then stories, then gods. A human sees a powerful animal. They wonder. They create a symbol. They tell a story. Generations later, the symbol becomes part of a tradition. The tradition becomes a religion. This process may explain why religions around the world share similar themes. Creation stories, sky beings, animal spirits, sacred mountains, life after death. The details change, but the questions remain the same. Where did we come from? Why are we here? What happens when we die? The cave paintings do not give us the answers, but they show us something extraordinary. The human mind was already searching, already imagining, already trying to understand a universe much larger than itself. The first religions may not have started with a god speaking to humans. Maybe they started with humans looking into the darkness, seeing something mysterious, and asking the first spiritual question: what if there is something more? For thousands of years, humans have searched for signs hidden in the natural world. A storm, a dream, a strange animal encounter, a sudden feeling that something unseen was nearby. Before humans built temples or created organized religions, many believed they could communicate with invisible forces through one special figure: the shaman, a person who stood between two worlds, the human world and the world of spirits. Across ancient cultures, the idea appears again and again. Someone who could enter altered states of consciousness, someone who could speak with ancestors, someone who could heal the sick, someone who could ask the unseen forces for guidance. The shaman may have been one of humanity's earliest spiritual specialists. Long before priests, long before kings claimed divine power, long before written scriptures, there may have been individuals who believed they could travel beyond ordinary reality. But where did this idea come from? Why did humans begin believing that certain people could communicate with another world? The answer may be hidden inside the human mind itself, because the human brain is capable of entering different states of awareness. Through dreams, through isolation, through music, through repetitive movement, through fasting, through extreme experiences. Humans can experience reality in unusual ways, and ancient people noticed this. A person in a trance might appear different. Their voice could change. Their behavior could transform. They might describe visions of animals, ancestors, or spirits. To ancient communities, these experiences could seem like proof that this person had entered another realm. One of the earliest clues connected to shamanism comes from prehistoric art. Inside ancient caves, researchers have found images that appear to show strange human-animal figures. Creatures with horns, animal heads, human bodies. Some scholars believe these images may represent shamans transforming into spirit beings. The idea was simple. A shaman could leave the ordinary world and become something beyond human. A protector, a healer, a guide. This connection between humans and animals appears in many ancient traditions. The animal was not just a creature. It was a source of power. The wolf represented strength. The eagle represented vision. The bear represented courage. The animal world became a spiritual language, and the shaman understood that language. But shamanism was not only about mystery, it also had a practical role. Early human groups faced enormous challenges: disease, injury, hunger, danger. Without modern medicine, people needed explanations. A sick person was not only physically unwell, perhaps a spirit had been disturbed, perhaps an ancestor was angry, perhaps balance had been lost. The shaman's role was to restore harmony. They performed rituals. They used plants. They created ceremonies. They offered comfort. And in many cases, this may have helped communities survive. Because belief itself can be powerful. A person who feels supported may endure suffering better. A group united by ritual may become stronger. Religion and survival were deeply connected. But the most fascinating part of shamanism is the idea of traveling between worlds. Many shamanic traditions describe journeys. The shaman enters a trance. Their spirit leaves the body. They travel through the sky. They enter underground worlds. They meet spirits. They return with knowledge. These stories appear across continents, from Siberia to the Americas, from Africa to Australia. Separated by thousands of miles, humans developed similar ideas. A layered universe, a world above, a world below, a human world in between. Why did this happen? One explanation is that humans everywhere share similar experiences. Dreams often feel like another reality. You can fly, speak with the dead, visit impossible places. The mind creates entire worlds while the body remains still. For ancient people, dreams may have been evidence that another realm existed. The dream world became connected to the spirit world, and dreams became messages. A hunter dreams of an animal. A warning appears. A dead relative speaks. The boundary between life and death becomes less clear. This may have influenced early religion more than we realize. Many ancient religions began with visions and revelations. A person claims to have seen something beyond normal reality. Others believe them. The story spreads. The tradition grows. Eventually, the experience becomes part of a larger belief system. But shamanism also reveals something important about human creativity. Humans do not only react to the world, we interpret it. We create meaning. A thunderstorm can be just weather, or it can be a battle between gods. A mountain can be just stone, or it can be a sacred home of spirits. Reality becomes a story, and stories shape civilization. One of the most mysterious aspects of ancient shamanism involves sound. Across many cultures, shamans use drums, chanting, and repetitive rhythms. The purpose is often to enter a trance state. The rhythm creates focus. The mind changes. The experience becomes more intense. Imagine an ancient ceremony thousands of years ago. A fire burns. People gather. A drum begins. The rhythm continues. The shaman enters a different state. The community watches. For them, something incredible is happening. A connection is being made. The invisible becomes visible. The unknown becomes understandable. Whether the spirits were real or not, the experience itself was real. The emotions, the visions, the sense of connection. This may explain why shamanic traditions lasted so long. They were not only explanations of nature, they were experiences. They made people feel connected to something greater. But as civilizations developed, shamanic ideas changed. Small groups became cities. Cities created governments. Governments created organized religions. The shaman slowly transformed into the priest. The personal spiritual journey became a public institution. Sacred rituals moved from caves and forests into temples. Spiritual authority became connected to kings and states. But the old ideas never completely disappeared. Even modern religions contain echoes of ancient shamanic beliefs. Visions, prophets, sacred journeys, healing rituals, communion with the divine. The idea that humans can connect with something beyond the physical world remains one of the strongest themes in human history. Perhaps shamanism was not the first religion. Perhaps it was something even older. The moment humans realized the mind itself could explore invisible worlds. A moment when imagination became spirituality. When dreams became messages. When nature became alive. And when humans first wondered, is there another reality beyond the one we see? That question may have been one of the first sparks that created religion. Not in a temple, not in a book, but inside the human mind. For thousands of years, humans have built monuments to their gods. They carved mountains into temples. They lifted stones that weighed thousands of tons. They created structures that survived long after the civilizations that built them disappeared. But one question remains hidden beneath every ancient monument. Were these places built for the gods? Or were they built because humans needed to feel connected to something greater? The answer may be found in one of the oldest and most mysterious achievements of ancient humanity: the birth of the sacred monument. Before humans built cities, before they created kingdoms, they were already gathering in special places. Places that were not ordinary. Places where something felt different. A mountain peak. A deep cave. A river crossing. A natural formation that inspired fear and wonder. These places became the first sacred landscapes. Because early humans did not separate nature from spirituality. The world around them was alive. The wind carried messages. Animals had spirits. The earth had power. The sky had meaning. And certain locations seemed to connect humans with forces beyond themselves. Over time, these natural sacred spaces transformed. Humans began to change the landscape. They placed stones. They created circles. They built platforms. They marked locations where rituals could happen. And slowly, the first temples were born. One of the most famous examples of this transformation is Göbekli Tepe. Hidden in the hills of modern Turkey, this ancient site shocked archaeologists when it was discovered, because it was far older than many expected. Dating back around 11,000 years, Göbekli Tepe was built before the rise of agriculture, before large cities, before many traditional ideas about civilization. And yet, there were massive stone pillars, some taller than humans, some weighing many tons, covered with carvings of animals, foxes, snakes, birds, wild boars, predators. The builders were hunter-gatherers, people who were once believed to live simple lives focused only on survival. But Göbekli Tepe challenged that idea. These people were organizing, planning, working together, creating something symbolic, something sacred. The site was not a home. There were no signs that large groups lived there permanently. Instead, it appears to have been a gathering place, a location where communities came together for rituals, perhaps one of the earliest known religious centers in human history. But the biggest mystery is not how they built it. The biggest mystery is why. Why spend enormous effort moving stones? Why carve animals into pillars? Why create a place that would take generations to complete? Maybe because humans have always needed sacred spaces. Places where ordinary life stops. Places where people gather around shared beliefs. Because religion is not only about gods, it is also about community, a shared story, a shared identity, a reason to work together. The construction of sacred monuments may have actually helped create civilization itself. People needed to cooperate. They needed organization. They needed leaders. They needed traditions. The temple may have come before the city, not the other way around. This completely changes the story of human history. For a long time, people assumed civilization began because humans discovered farming. Agriculture created villages. Villages created cities. Cities created governments. But places like Göbekli Tepe suggest something different. Maybe humans gathered first because of belief. Maybe religion helped create civilization. The desire to worship, to remember, to celebrate, to understand the unknown. These motivations may have brought humans together before anything else. And this pattern continued. Thousands of years later, civilizations across the world built sacred structures. The Egyptians built pyramids and temples. The Mesopotamians built ziggurats. The Maya built towering pyramids aligned with the heavens. The Greeks created temples for their gods. The same idea appeared everywhere, a place between humans and the divine. But why did these structures become so massive? Because size creates emotion. A small building feels human. A massive structure feels beyond human. Standing beneath giant stone pillars, a person feels small. And that feeling may have been the point. Ancient architecture was designed to create awe. The same emotion humans feel when looking at mountains, oceans, and the night sky. A feeling that there is something larger than ourselves. This may be one of the foundations of religion, the experience of wonder. But sacred monuments also reveal another important part of human nature, the desire for permanence. Humans know they are temporary. Our lives are short. But stone can last thousands of years. By building monuments, ancient people created something that could outlive them. A message carved into the earth. A statement saying, "We existed. We believed. We searched for meaning." This desire appears throughout history. Kings built monuments to show power. Civilizations built temples to honor gods. Communities built sacred spaces to preserve memory. All of them were attempts to fight against time. But there is another mystery. Many ancient monuments seem connected to the sky. They align with the sun, the moon, the stars. This suggests ancient builders were not only religious, they were observers of the universe. They understood cycles, seasons, movement, time. Religion and astronomy became connected, because the heavens were one of the greatest mysteries humans faced. The sky seemed ordered, predictable, powerful, and ancient people wanted to understand their place within it. The temple became a bridge, earth below, heaven above, humans in the middle, a meeting point between worlds. This idea appears again and again. The mountain as a sacred place, the temple as a cosmic center, the tower reaching toward the sky, humans building upward, always trying to get closer to the unknown. But perhaps the greatest mystery of ancient monuments is not the stones. It is the people, the forgotten builders, the workers, the artists, the communities, the humans who looked at a world full of uncertainty and decided to create something meaningful. They did not know what the universe truly was. They did not have modern science. But they had imagination. They had curiosity. They had the desire to understand. And that desire changed everything. Because religion was never only about gods. It was about humanity's first attempt to answer the biggest questions. Why are we here? What controls the world around us? What happens after death? Are we alone? The first temples were not just buildings. They were questions made from stone. And thousands of years later, we are still trying to understand the answers hidden inside them. For most of human history, the greatest mysteries were not found in distant galaxies or unexplored oceans. They were found all around us. in the thunder that shook the sky, in the rivers that gave life, in the animals that provided food, in the darkness that came every night. Ancient humans lived in a world where nature controlled everything. A successful hunt meant survival. A failed harvest meant hunger. A storm could destroy everything a community had built. And when people faced forces they could not control, they searched for explanations. They searched for meaning. And slowly, the natural world itself became sacred. This may have been one of the oldest forms of religion, the belief that everything around us contains a spirit or hidden force. A river was not just water. A mountain was not just rock. A tree was not just wood. The world was alive. This idea is known as animism, and it appears to be one of the most ancient spiritual concepts ever created. Long before humans imagined powerful gods ruling from the sky, they may have believed the universe itself was filled with invisible beings, spirits of animals, spirits of places, spirits of ancestors. For ancient communities, nature was not separate from humanity. Humans were part of a larger living system. Every action mattered. Taking an animal's life required respect. Using resources required balance. Ignoring the spirits of nature could bring disaster. This belief changed the way people interacted with the world. A hunter did not simply kill an animal. They entered a relationship with it. The animal gave its life. The humans had responsibilities in return. This idea appears in many traditional cultures. Before hunting, people performed rituals. After hunting, they expressed gratitude. The animal was honored, because without it, the community would not survive. This reveals something important about early religion. It may not have started with fear alone. It may have started with respect, a feeling that life was connected. One of the strongest examples of animistic thinking appears in the relationship between humans and animals. Throughout history, certain animals became powerful symbols. The wolf, the eagle, the bear, the snake, the lion. Each represented qualities humans admired or feared: strength, wisdom, speed, danger, transformation. Animals became more than creatures. They became spiritual symbols. This is why animal imagery appears so often in ancient religions. Egypt had animal-headed gods. Mesopotamia created hybrid creatures. The Minoans connected bulls with power. Many cultures saw animals as bridges between the human world and the mysterious forces of existence. But why animals? Because ancient humans lived closely with them. They watched animals survive. They saw their intelligence, their strength, their ability to sense danger. To early humans, animals seemed to possess knowledge that humans did not. A bird could fly. A fish could survive underwater. A snake could disappear and return. These qualities seemed almost magical. And from this mystery, spiritual ideas grew. The snake became a symbol of transformation because it shed its skin. The bird became a symbol of the soul because it moved between earth and sky. The lion became a symbol of power because it dominated the landscape. Nature became a language, a way for humans to understand invisible ideas. But animism was not limited to animals. The landscape itself became sacred. Mountains became homes of gods. Rivers became sources of life and spiritual power. Caves became entrances to other worlds. Trees became symbols of connection between earth and heaven. The idea of a world tree appears in many ancient traditions. A giant tree connecting different levels of existence. The roots below. The trunk in the human world. The branches reaching into the heavens. Different cultures created different versions, but the symbol remained. Humans standing between the unknown worlds, above and below. life and death, earth and sky. This reveals a pattern in human spirituality. People everywhere created ways to connect different realities, the visible and invisible, the physical and spiritual, the known and unknown. But perhaps one of the most fascinating examples of nature worship comes from rivers. Civilizations were born around rivers. The Nile, the Tigris and Euphrates, the Indus, the Yellow River. Water created life. It allowed farming, transportation, growth. Without rivers, many great civilizations would never have existed. So rivers became sacred. In Egypt, the Nile was connected to the gods and the cycle of life. In Mesopotamia, rivers were both blessings and dangers. They gave food, but also caused destruction. The power of water was impossible to ignore. To ancient humans, the river was not just a resource. It was a force, something greater than themselves, something deserving respect. The same happened with storms. Thunder and lightning were among the most terrifying natural events. A powerful sound from the sky, a flash of light, rain falling from above. Without scientific explanation, storms seemed like communication. A battle, a warning, a message. Many cultures created storm gods. They were often among the most powerful deities, because controlling storms meant controlling survival. The ability to bring rain was the ability to give life. The ability to create storms was the ability to destroy. Nature shaped the gods humans imagined. But as religions became more organized, something changed. The spirits of nature became personalities. They gained names, stories, families, human characteristics. The storm became a god. The river became a goddess. The mountain became a divine home. The invisible forces of nature transformed into characters. This was the birth of mythology. Humans turned the unknown into stories. Stories that could be remembered, shared, passed down. And these stories became the foundation of civilizations. But there is a deeper question. Did humans create spirits because they misunderstood nature? Or did they create spirits because they experienced something real? This question has no simple answer. Science can explain storms, animals, rivers, mountains. But science does not explain why humans feel awe, why a landscape can feel sacred, why certain places create powerful emotions. The experience of wonder is real, and it has influenced humanity for thousands of years. Perhaps early religion was not simply an attempt to explain the world. Perhaps it was also a way to experience it, to feel connected, to feel part of something larger. Animism may have been humanity's first spiritual relationship with the universe. Before humans worshipped gods with human faces, they respected the world around them. Before temples existed, nature was the temple. Before prayers were written, humans spoke through rituals. Before gods had names, the earth itself was sacred. And maybe the oldest religious question was not, who controls the universe? Maybe it was, what if everything is connected? That idea may have been one of the first steps toward religion. A human standing in the wilderness, looking at the world around them, and realizing they were not separate. For thousands of years, humans have searched for the origin of everything. The first stars, the first life, the first humans. And perhaps the biggest question of all, who or what created the universe? Almost every ancient civilization had an answer. Some believed the world emerged from endless oceans of chaos. Some believed a creator god shaped everything. Some believed the universe was born from a cosmic egg. Others believed creation was not a beginning at all, but an endless cycle of destruction and rebirth. The details were different. The names were different. But the question was always the same. How did everything begin? The search for the first creation stories reveals something extraordinary about humanity. Before humans understood the universe scientifically, they used imagination. They looked at the world around them and tried to explain existence itself. And these stories became some of the most powerful foundations of religion. One of the oldest recorded creation stories comes from ancient Mesopotamia. Thousands of years ago, in the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, people wrote the story known as the Enuma Elish. It begins not with earth, not with humans, but with water, a vast, endless ocean of chaos. Two ancient forces existed: Apsu, the god of fresh water, and Tiamat, the goddess of salt water. From their union, the first gods were born. But the younger gods became loud. They disturbed the older generation, and conflict began. Apsu wanted to destroy them, but the younger gods fought back. The universe itself became a battlefield. Eventually, the storm god Marduk rose to power. He defeated Tiamat, and from her body, he created the world, the heavens, the earth, the structure of existence. Humans were created later to serve the gods. This story reveals something important about Mesopotamian religion. The universe was not peaceful. Creation came through struggle. Order came from chaos. This idea appears in many ancient traditions. The belief that civilization itself was a victory against disorder. The same pattern appears in Egypt. The Egyptians believed that before creation, there was only a dark, endless ocean called Nun. From this chaos, the first land emerged. The creator God appeared, and the world began. The Egyptians believed creation was not a one-time event. Every morning when the sun rose, creation happened again. Every night, darkness returned. Every sunrise was a victory over chaos. This belief shaped Egyptian religion deeply. Life was a cycle. Death was not the end. The universe constantly renewed itself. The sun disappeared, then returned. The crops died, then grew again. Humans died. But the spirit continued. Everything followed a pattern, a balance, a rhythm. This idea was represented by Ma'at, the force of order and harmony. Without Ma'at, chaos would return. The universe required balance, and humans had a responsibility to maintain it. Thousands of miles away, another civilization developed its own explanation: ancient India. The earliest Hindu traditions contain some of the most complex creation ideas ever developed. Unlike many religions, Hindu traditions often describe creation not as a single event, but as an endless process. The universe is created, destroyed, recreated, again and again. One famous idea describes a cosmic being whose existence is connected to the creation of everything. Another describes the universe emerging from a cosmic egg. The universe itself becomes something alive, something that grows and changes. This reflects a major difference in ancient Indian thought. Time was not always viewed as a straight line. It was a cycle, a repeating pattern. Birth, death, rebirth. The universe itself followed the same rhythm. In ancient China, creation stories also connected the universe with balance. One famous story describes Pangu, a giant being who emerged from a cosmic egg. When he woke, he separated heaven and earth. His body became parts of the world. His breath became the wind. His voice became thunder. His eyes became the sun and moon. The message was powerful. The universe was not separate from life. Everything was connected. The world itself was sacred. Another important concept in ancient Chinese religion was the idea of heaven. Not necessarily a place, but a powerful force representing order and legitimacy. The ruler's authority depended on harmony with heaven. A king who ruled badly could lose heaven's approval. This connected religion, morality, and politics. The universe had order. Human society needed to reflect that order. But perhaps the most fascinating creation stories come from the realization that humans everywhere created similar ideas without direct contact. Why? Why do so many cultures begin with chaos? Why do so many creation myths involve water? Why do so many stories describe a separation between heaven and earth? One possibility is that humans share similar experiences. The world begins in darkness. Before birth, there is a kind of hidden existence. Water surrounds us before we enter life. The sky above feels distant. The earth below feels stable. These experiences may have shaped the first myths. Another possibility is that humans naturally search for causes. We know everything around us has a beginning. A tree grows from a seed. An animal is born from parents. So we ask, what was the first cause? What created everything else? This question may be one of the deepest human instincts, the desire to find an origin. But creation stories were not only explanations, they were also moral lessons. They explained humanity's role. Are humans servants of the gods? Partners with the gods? Part of nature? A temporary existence in a larger cycle? Different cultures answered differently. But each answer shaped how people lived. The Mesopotamians saw humans as workers for divine forces. The Egyptians saw humans as participants in maintaining cosmic balance. Indian traditions explored the relationship between the individual and the universe. Chinese traditions focused on harmony between heaven and earth. Creation stories became maps for understanding life. And perhaps that is why they survived. Because humans are not only interested in where the universe came from, we want to know where we fit inside it. Are we important? Are we insignificant? Are we part of a greater design? These questions have followed humanity from the first campfires to modern science. Today, we study galaxies. We explore the origins of the universe through physics. We search for the first moments after the Big Bang. But the ancient question remains, why is there something instead of nothing? The first humans who looked at the stars asked the same thing. They did not have telescopes. They did not have equations. They had only their minds, their curiosity, their imagination. And from that, they created the first stories of creation, the first attempts to understand existence itself. Maybe the oldest religions were not simply about worshiping gods. Maybe they were humanity's first attempt at answering the greatest mystery of all, the mystery of being here. For thousands of years, humans have searched for the first moment when belief became religion. Was it the first burial, the first cave painting, the first sacred object, the first temple? Or did religion begin somewhere much deeper, inside the human mind itself? Because before humans built monuments to gods, they built something even more powerful. Stories. Stories about where we came from. Stories about why the world exists. Stories about what happens after death. And slowly, those stories transformed into religions that shaped entire civilizations. But one of the most important steps in this transformation was the creation of rituals. Because religion was not only about believing, it was about doing, repeating, remembering, gathering together. A ritual is a human action given a deeper meaning. A simple movement can become sacred. A simple object can become powerful. A simple location can become holy. And this ability to transform ordinary things into symbols may be one of the greatest abilities of the human mind. The earliest rituals were probably connected to survival, hunting, death, birth. the changing seasons, the forces that controlled human existence. For hunter-gatherers, life was uncertain. A successful hunt could mean food for the entire group. A failed hunt could mean suffering. So people created ceremonies. They painted animals. They performed dances. They prepared themselves mentally and spiritually. Perhaps they believed these actions influenced the outcome. Or perhaps the ritual itself created unity and confidence. Either way, rituals mattered. They changed how humans experienced the world. One of the most fascinating examples is the relationship between humans and hunting. Ancient cave paintings often show animals. Not random animals. The animals humans depended on. The creatures that determined survival. Some researchers believe these paintings were part of hunting rituals. The image was not just a picture. It was a connection. A way of entering the world of the animal. A way of showing respect. A way of asking for success. Imagine a group of ancient hunters preparing before a dangerous journey. They gather inside a cave. The fire burns. The walls are covered with images. A leader tells a story. The group listens. Everyone shares the same belief. They are no longer just individuals. They are one community. This is one of the hidden powers of religion. It creates connection. Humans are social creatures. We survive by cooperating. Shared rituals strengthen relationships. They create trust. They create identity. A person who shares the same rituals as others feels part of something larger. This may explain why every major civilization developed religious practices. Not because humans everywhere created identical gods, but because humans everywhere needed connection. Another powerful ritual was the treatment of the dead. As we explored earlier, ancient burials suggest humans believed death had meaning. But burial itself was also a ritual. The body was prepared. The grave was arranged. Objects were placed nearby. The community gathered. These actions created a bridge between the living and the dead. Death became more than an ending. It became an event with purpose. And this changed human history. Because once humans began believing the dead continued in some way, ancestors became powerful. The past became connected to the present. Families remembered those who came before them. Generations became linked. This idea shaped many ancient religions. In China, ancestors became central figures of respect. In Rome, families honored their ancestors. In many indigenous traditions, ancestors remained active members of the community. The dead were not forgotten. They became part of the story. But rituals also connected humans with nature. The changing seasons were especially important. For ancient farmers, survival depended on understanding cycles. The return of rain, the growth of plants, the movement of the sun, the arrival of spring. Nature appeared to die and return, and humans created ceremonies around these cycles. The idea of rebirth became one of the most common themes in religion. The seed disappears. A plant grows. Winter comes. Spring returns. The sun sets. The sun rises again. These natural patterns became spiritual symbols. Death and renewal became connected. This idea appears in many religions. Different stories. Different gods. But the same observation. The world constantly changes. Nothing truly stays the same. Rituals helped humans feel connected to these changes. They gave structure to uncertainty. But there is another reason rituals became so powerful. The human brain responds strongly to repetition. A repeated action becomes meaningful. A repeated phrase becomes powerful. A repeated ceremony becomes tradition. After generations, people may no longer remember why the ritual started. But they continue because it connects them to their ancestors. It connects them to history. It connects them to identity. This is why some rituals survive for thousands of years. They become more than actions. They become memories. And memories are one of the strongest forces in human culture. But rituals also created something else: religious specialists. As communities grew, some individuals became experts in ceremonies. The shaman, the priest, the spiritual leader. These people understood traditions. They performed important rituals. They interpreted signs. They became bridges between humans and the unseen. This changed religion forever. Belief became organized. Stories became systems. Rituals became institutions. Eventually, temples appeared. Priests gained power. Kings connected themselves with the divine. Religion became part of civilization itself. But beneath all of these changes, the original purpose remained. Humans were trying to understand their place in existence. They were trying to deal with uncertainty, death, nature, the unknown. Rituals gave humans a feeling of control in a world they could not fully understand. A storm could not be stopped. Death could not be avoided. The future could not be predicted. But humans could gather. They could tell stories. They could perform ceremonies. They could create meaning. And that may have been one of the greatest discoveries in human history: the ability to create meaning. A rock becomes sacred. A place becomes holy. A moment becomes a ceremony. The physical world becomes connected to the invisible world. This is how religion grew. Not from one single moment. Not from one single civilization. But through thousands of small human experiences. A burial. A painting. A song. A dance. A story around a fire. Each one adding another piece. Until eventually, humanity created something enormous. Religions that shaped civilizations. But the roots were much older. They were hidden in the earliest moments when humans looked at the world and realized there is more here than what we can see. The first rituals were humanity's first attempt to speak with the unknown. And perhaps they were also humanity's first attempt to understand itself. For most of human history, the greatest mysteries were not written in books or carved into monuments. They were hidden underground, deep inside mountains, beneath layers of forgotten earth, in places where ancient humans left behind the first evidence of what they feared, what they loved, and what they believed. Caves. The dark chambers beneath the surface of the world may have been some of humanity's earliest sacred spaces. Long before temples reached toward the sky, humans entered the darkness below. They walked into silence. They carried fire. And they created images that would survive for tens of thousands of years. But why? Why did ancient humans travel deep into dangerous caves to paint animals and symbols? Why did they choose darkness as the place to communicate with something beyond themselves? The answer may reveal one of the oldest secrets of religion: the birth of sacred space. Today, caves are often seen as simple geological formations, places filled with rocks, minerals, and underground rivers. But for ancient humans, caves may have been something completely different. They were entrances, not just into the earth, but into another reality, a place where the normal world disappeared, where echoes created mysterious voices, where shadows moved with the firelight, where imagination became almost impossible to separate from reality. To an ancient person, entering a cave was not just walking underground. It was entering the unknown, and the unknown has always been connected with the sacred. One of the most famous examples of prehistoric cave art comes from Europe. Thousands of years ago, humans painted animals deep inside caves: bison, horses, deer, wolves, predators. These paintings were not placed near entrances where everyone could easily see them. Many were hidden far inside, in chambers that required difficult journeys. The deeper the cave, the more mysterious the purpose becomes. Some researchers believe these places were used for rituals. Perhaps only certain members of the community entered. Perhaps they performed ceremonies. Perhaps they believed the cave was a place where humans could communicate with spirits. The paintings may have been more than art. They may have been a form of spiritual technology, a way to interact with invisible forces. Imagine standing deep inside a cave thousands of years ago. There is no electricity, no artificial light, only fire. The flames move. The walls seem alive. The painted animals appear to move as shadows pass across them. The sounds echo around you. A simple human voice becomes something powerful. A whisper becomes a presence. A song becomes something supernatural. The environment itself creates an intense experience. And this may have been exactly the point. The cave transformed ordinary reality. It created a feeling of entering another world. Many ancient religions later developed similar ideas. The belief that sacred places exist between worlds, between humans and gods, between life and death, between the physical and spiritual. Caves became symbols of transformation. A person enters darkness and returns changed. This idea appears across many cultures. Heroes enter caves and face challenges. Spiritual figures retreat into caves to gain wisdom. Gods and spirits are believed to live inside mountains. The connection between underground spaces and the sacred is extremely ancient. But cave art also reveals something else: the incredible imagination of early humans. Some paintings show animals that do not exist, creatures combining different species, human-animal figures, strange beings that appear half real and half supernatural. One of the oldest examples is the famous Lion Man figurine, a human body, a lion head, a creature that exists between two worlds. This is a major clue because it shows that humans were not only observing nature, they were transforming it. They were creating new beings in their minds. And this ability to imagine things that do not physically exist may be one of the foundations of religion. A god is not something humans simply discover in nature. A god is something humans imagine. A powerful idea, a symbol, a presence. The first mythological beings may have been born in places exactly like these caves. But there is another mystery. Many prehistoric caves appear to have special acoustic qualities. Some chambers create strange echoes. A human voice can seem to come from nowhere. A sound can surround the listener. For ancient people, this must have been extraordinary. A hidden voice inside a dark chamber could feel like communication from another world. Perhaps rituals used sound, singing, chanting, rhythm, music. All of these can create powerful emotional experiences. Even today, music can change how people feel. It can create fear, hope, connection, awe. Ancient humans understood this power. They may have used sound to create spiritual experiences. The cave became a place where the boundaries between reality and imagination became weaker. But why did religion need places like caves? Because humans needed more than survival. They needed meaning. Life was dangerous. Animals could kill. Weather could destroy. Disease could appear without warning. Death was everywhere. Religion offered a way to organize this chaos. The cave became a place where humans could confront their fears. A place where they could transform fear into understanding. The darkness was not only frightening, it was also mysterious.